What happens when a 3-year-old Einstein refuses to take a bath and accidentally invents time travel instead? Rubber ducks become time warriors. Bathtubs float into space. The laws of physics? Rewritten in crayon. And somewhere in the multiverse, baby Tesla is wiring potatoes to microwaves. This isn't history. This isn't science class. This is what happens when genius throws a tantrum and builds a wormhole to avoid shampoo. One squeak, one splash, everything changes. So before the timeline resets, watch the full saga unfold on this channel. Because if Einstein can bend space-time with peanut butter and a spoon, imagine what he'll do next. In the quiet town of Ulm, Germany, nestled between sleepy rooftops and curious cats on windowsills, lived a 3-year-old boy named Albert Einstein. Now, you must understand this was no ordinary toddler. While most children his age were learning how to count jelly beans or stack wooden blocks, Albert had already attempted to explain gravity to the vacuum cleaner, argued with the family goldfish about thermodynamics, and insisted his cereal be arranged in Fibonacci spirals before breakfast. And yet, despite his towering intellect and uncanny ability to dismantle and reassemble clocks using nothing but a spoon and intense eye contact, Albert Einstein feared one thing more than chaos theory, thunder, or even peas touching carrots on his plate: bath time. It began every evening at 6:45 sharp. The house would fall under a hush, the kind that warned of impending doom. His mother would appear in the hallway like a figure from legend, armed with a warm towel, shampoo that smelled like flowers and lies, and the dreaded duck-shaped loofah. Her voice would echo like fate itself. "Albert, it's time for your bath." It wasn't a suggestion. It wasn't a question. It was a sentence, a declaration of war. Albert would freeze, spoon halfway to his mouth, brain processing 100 escape plans. And on this particular evening, something snapped. He dropped the spoon. He stared at the wall. Then, without a word, he picked up a red crayon, marched to the wooden floorboard behind the kitchen table, and began scribbling furiously. "There must be a way," he muttered to himself, "to escape time itself." What the average adult would see as crayon chaos was, in fact, advanced temporal mathematics. He wasn't drawing. He was calculating. The universe, Albert believed, was not a straight line. It was more like a messy spaghetti noodle that sometimes twisted backward, folded in on itself, or, if you added peanut butter, hummed softly in a minor key. If time could bend, perhaps it could skip. If it could skip, then maybe, just maybe, he could skip past bath time entirely. Albert stepped back to admire his work. There was a brilliant cluster of loops, spirals, and one slightly suspicious duck wearing goggles. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. His mom called again, this time from closer. The bathroom door creaked open. The sound of running water slithered down the hallway like a warning. "Albert, don't make me count to 3. He had minutes, maybe less. He needed materials. He scanned the room like a hawk looking for prey. His eyes landed on the essentials. 1. The family's antique cuckoo clock. 2. A pile of spoons from breakfast. 3. A roll of duct tape hidden behind the couch. 4. A half-eaten banana. Perfect. He waddled across the room, grabbing components, dodging chair legs, whispering formulas only he understood. The banana was for energy, brain fuel, obviously. The spoons were for signal relay. The cuckoo clock? That was his flux core. Duct tape. Well, duct tape was for everything. In 5 minutes, he had built what resembled either a time machine or a very confused blender. He named it the Chrono Baby 1.0. It hummed. It clicked. It sparked once, lightly singeing the carpet. Albert squinted. Not bad for a prototype. He strapped on his father's old aviator goggles, far too big for his tiny head, and stood before the device. He pressed a button made entirely out of a jelly bean. Nothing. He smacked the side of it. The cuckoo bird popped out and screamed at him in German. Then a flicker. The living room lights dimmed. The air buzzed with static. His hair, which already had a life of its own, rose like it was charging up for a speech. In the hallway, his mother paused. She sniffed the air. Albert. He was glowing. In that moment, Albert Einstein moved forward in time by 4 seconds, and unfortunately landed right back at the exact same moment. Albert, his mother's voice rang out, closer now, boots stomping like destiny on hardwood floors. Albert blinked. For seconds, he had done it. He had moved through time. Not far, not fast, but far enough to prove the concept. His joy, however, was short-lived, because now his mom was here. Standing in the doorway, hands on hips, duck loofah dangling from one wrist like a badge of maternal authority. Albert, the bath is ready. No more games. Albert's brain, running at 9,000 calculations per second, considered pretending to faint, claiming diplomatic immunity, or blaming the cat. But none of those felt scientific. He needed a better plan, a bigger leap. If 4 seconds was all the chrono baby could manage, then he would have to go deeper, earlier, further. He needed to skip back in time. Before bath time was invented, before soap was born, maybe thought to the Renaissance, maybe further. Just 1 more minute, Mama, he said sweetly, blinking through the goggles. She eyed the humming contraption, the banana wires, the crayon math on the walls. She exhaled. You have until I count to 3. Albert sprinted to the machine. He flipped every spoon, turned every dial. He fed it the second half of the banana and kicked it once, lovingly. Then he pulled the final lever, a yo-yo taped to a book about penguins. This time, the lights didn't flicker. The lights exploded. Reality bent inward. The cuckoo clock cawed 3 times in reverse. Albert was sucked forward, or backward, or sideways, hard to tell. He found himself floating in a corridor of bubbles. But these weren't ordinary bubbles. They had equations in them. Symbols. Dates. He passed a floating bar of soap that screamed in Latin. Time was breaking. Or possibly burping. He landed with a soft thud on a pink rug, surrounded by marble pillars, golden statues of rubber ducks, and what appeared to be a baby version of Isaac Newton levitating a towel using sheer willpower. What is this place? Albert whispered. A tall being, wrapped in a robe made of warm steam, approached. It spoke in a language made entirely of giggles and splash noises. This, it said, is the bath time nexus. Albert gasped. He had heard rumors, legends whispered in sandbox circles and finger-painted scrolls. A realm where bath time was eternal, where soap ruled with a slippery fist. He turned to run, but found his machine was gone, replaced by a sponge the size of a piano. Then he heard it, a faint voice from the real world, cutting through the bubbles and dimensions. Albert, I'm not kidding. I'm counting. 1. Panic rose in his tiny genius heart. He needed to get out. But before she reached 3, in the nexus, Newton the baby was splashing in a tub made of pure marble. A duck floated by, wearing a monocle. Einstein spotted something, a glimmer behind the duck. His machine, or at least the flux core. He dove for it. Soap flew. Newton shouted something about hygiene and honor. But Einstein rolled, grabbed the core, and shoved it into his pajama pocket. He clicked his heels, chanted the formula for bubble decay, and whispered, back to mess, away from cleanliness. The nexus swirled. Color screamed. Time did a backflip. And suddenly, he was back. Living room. Normal light. Normal air. No floating ducks. He looked down. His mom still stood before him. She hadn't moved. Still at 1. He had done it. He had returned before the count ended. A full reset. Victory. But then she said it. 2. And that's when Albert realized the truth. The real problem wasn't space-time, wormholes, or even soap. The real problem was, you can't outsmart your mom. She stepped forward, lifting him gently, lovingly, firmly. He protested. He offered diagrams, bribes, and theoretical reasons why bathing was outdated. She smiled. She hummed. She pressed a kiss to his forehead. Time travel doesn't get you out of being clean, darling. As she carried him toward the bathroom, the chrono baby flickered once more. It beeped. It sighed. It whispered, mission incomplete. But Albert didn't give up. Not yet. Because in his bathwater, floating next to the duck, was a single red crayon. And with that, he knew. Tomorrow was a new day. And bath time would never see him coming. The next morning arrived like any other in the Einstein household. Birds chirped outside, the neighbor's dog barked at shadows, and somewhere deep inside the house, a toddler genius lay wide-eyed in his crib, already plotting the downfall of bath time as we know it. Albert Einstein, age 3, had survived the previous night's bath. Barely. He'd been captured mid-escape, defeated by the most formidable force known to science, his mother's count to 3. But failure had never stopped Albert before. Not when he tried to electrify an orange using only static socks, and certainly not when he tried to defy the arrow of time. It only made him more determined. As sunlight crept across the room, Albert sat upright, his diaper rustling like a battle drum. In one hand, he held his trusted sidekick, a yellow rubber duck named Professor Quackers. In the other, he held a single crayon. The same one he'd used to scribble time theory across the kitchen floor yesterday. It had survived the bath. He considered it a sign. He looked at Professor Quackers with solemnity. "Today," he whispered, "we conquer bath time. Not by hiding, not by running, but by rewriting the very logic of the universe." Professor Quackers blinked in eternal rubbery silence. Albert took that as agreement. By breakfast, the house had descended into the usual Einstein-level chaos. The cat was chewing on Albert's math blocks. His dad was arguing with the toaster again. And Albert? He was busy in the corner of the nursery, smearing mashed peas across the wall. This wasn't a tantrum. This was science. See, crayons had limits. But mashed peas? Mashed peas were organic, spreadable, and best of all, green. The perfect medium for what Albert called P-based equation mapping, a breakthrough in baby physics. With great precision, he swirled peas into loops, whirls, and dots. The patterns weren't random. They were formulas, hypotheses, sketches of theories so advanced, even the ceiling fan paused for a second to try to understand them. He labeled them in his own toddler-coded system. Squiggle squash equals banana time lag. Duck velocity divided by soap tension equals NO bath. Times superscript 2 plus diaper resistance equals infinity delay. It was genius. It was sticky. It smelled vaguely of guilt and Gerber carrots. Professor Quackers sat nearby, wearing a thimble on his head like a thinking cap. Albert had taped a googly eye onto him the day before, believing it helped with data analysis. Whether it did or not, the duck had become his official lab assistant. They ran tests: drop velocity, water tension resistance, the reaction time of toddlers when faced with incoming towels. Albert even strapped Professor Quackers to a makeshift zip line made from shoelaces and launched him from the bookshelf. The duck soared. The duck quacked. The duck hit a pillow and bounced twice, proving beyond doubt that rubber could absorb time displacement. Or maybe just pillows. Either way, notes were taken. Around noon, while the adults were busy discussing grown-up things like taxes and the fact that Albert had reprogrammed the baby monitor to play Beethoven's Fifth every time someone said, bath, the young genius made a breakthrough. He discovered that if you mix mashed peas with just a touch of formula milk and a crushed teething biscuit, it produced a paste that, when applied to the wall, dried into a flaky crust that could conduct static electricity. This changed everything. He began sketching faster. His formulas grew more complex. Arrows flew between symbols. Peas flew across the room. He muttered under his breath, "Time is not a line. It's a loop, a diaper pin bending around itself." Professor Quackers, now wearing a cape made from a sock, stood on the table beside a toy mirror that Albert had designated the observation portal. The mirror, by all accounts, was just a mirror. But today, something changed. Albert, in a moment of frustration over the inconsistency of soap molecules, smacked the mirror with a spoon. There was a spark, a small one, blue. At first, Albert thought it was static, but then the spark lingered. A pulse, a shimmer, like light trying to fold. He leaned closer. The mirror showed not his reflection, but another version of his room. The mashed peas on that wall moved, shifted. They were updating themselves. It was like his equations were alive. Albert backed away slowly. That's not reflection. That's recursion. He scribbled frantically. mirror recursion, rubber duck interference patterns, baby-induced quantum echo theory. Then it happened. The duck, Professor Quackers, who had been resting innocently beside the mirror, twitched. Just once. Albert looked over. A faint glow surrounded the duck's outline. A soft hum buzzed in the air, like a music box playing from the future. Then, with no warning, a flash. Bright, blinding, blue, and gone. Albert was knocked backwards into his pile of teething rings. He scrambled up, diaper-puffed and slightly askew. The mirror was dark. The air smelled like burned pudding. And where Professor Quackers had been, nothing. The duck was gone. Einstein's lip trembled. Not because he was sad, not because he was scared, but because the laws of nature, his playground, had just rewritten themselves. Temporal displacement, he whispered. But no residue. That wasn't physics, that was temporal deflection. He crawled forward, inspecting the floor. No scorch marks, no signs of combustion. The thimble still rolled in place. He stared at the wall. The equations had changed. Where once there were spirals and squiggles, now the mashed peas had hardened into sharp lines. Symbols. Triangles within triangles. He recognized one of them. A symbol he'd seen only once, in the margins of a book he wasn't supposed to read. His mom's high school algebra notebook. He gulped. Professor Quackers hadn't just vanished. He'd been sent. Somewhere. Sometime. Albert looked at the crayon in his hand. Then at the mirror. Then at the peas. This wasn't a game anymore. He wasn't just escaping bath time. He was rewriting how cause and effect worked. Time wasn't broken. It was wide open. But here's the thing about being 3 years old. You feel everything at once. The thrill of genius. The weight of discovery. The sadness of losing your duck best friend. Albert sat down. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. Instead, he did what any true scientist would do. He reached for more peas. The work wasn't finished. He needed to find Quackers. He needed to calculate not just when the duck had gone, but why. Maybe bath time was connected. Maybe soap wasn't the enemy. Maybe it was the trigger. Maybe the duck had absorbed residual data from all those submersions and bath bubbles, and that energy had finally ruptured the fragile veil between moments. He needed answers. He needed more teething biscuits. As the sun dipped lower and the house fell into its soft afternoon hum, Albert filled an entire wall with symbols. Arrows pointed toward the mirror. Circles connected to diapers. A drawing of his mother appeared, labeled Chrono Enforcer. At some point, his father walked in, glanced at the pea mural, nodded like he understood none of it but respected the effort, and left without comment. Einstein didn't notice. He was inside the math now. And just when he thought the day would end with no progress, the mirror shimmered again. Faint. Brief. A flicker. He rushed toward it, heart pounding, mashed peas dripping from his fingers. And there, for 1/2 second, he saw something. A duck, wearing goggles, floating in space, blinking slowly. And behind the duck, a doorway, a bathtub, floating. Albert inhaled sharply. The duck was trying to send a message. A warning. Bath time was evolving. The mirror snapped shut. The reflection returned. Albert stood in silence, then turned, marched to his crib, climbed in without help, pulled the blanket to his chin, and whispered into the night. Tomorrow, we build Chrono Baby 2.0. By the third day, Albert Einstein had already skipped 2 naps, consumed an unhealthy number of animal crackers, and renamed his toy box the Department of Quantum Disobedience. All because of one thing. The duck. Professor Quackers, his loyal rubber companion, had vanished in a flash of blue light and a soft fizz, like soda thinking too hard. He hadn't been swallowed. He hadn't walked off. He'd been zapped. Through time. Einstein's mind was still spinning with formulas. His mashed pea calculations had hardened into crusty green constellations across the nursery wall. His mother had tried to wipe them, but they resisted cleaning like they had free will. And now, as the morning sun painted golden beams on the carpet, Albert sat in the middle of his room, diaper slightly sideways, eyes wide, holding a peanut butter jar like it held the key to the multiverse. He had made a decision. Enough of the scribbling. Enough of theorizing, duck loss morning, and dramatic size into baby monitors. Today, he would build it. His first real machine. Operation Time Out of Time had officially begun. Albert shuffled over to his building blocks, not the simple plastic ones, but the advanced Lego bricks his uncle said were for ages 12 and up. Albert had eaten 2 of those by mistake once. Now he just built with them. He began laying out pieces like a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Red brick, blue plate, wheel, mini window, half-sucked gummy bear. Every piece had a purpose. Even the gummy bear. It was sticky and looked slightly radioactive. But he needed more. So he waited. Not long. At exactly 9:17 a.m., his father, an engineer with a suspiciously missing left sock, walked in to grab his alarm clock from the dresser. He found only a note that read, "Borrowed for progress. Return later. Also sorry about the sock. Possibly gone forever." Downstairs, the peanut butter jar was quietly stolen from the kitchen shelf, mid-toast spreading. A distraction involving a sudden fire alarm, rigged by Albert using a baby monitor and a toaster, helped cover the theft. And so, the materials gathered. Lego bricks, structure. Peanut butter, fuel, adhesive, emotional support. Alarm clock, time regulation core. One unmatched sock for experimental launch protocol. He laid it all on his playmat, which he renamed Launch Bay 1. Albert began assembly. Peanut butter went first, a thick, sticky layer smeared across the Lego baseplate, giving the machine the smell of impending genius or a toddler's snack accident. The Lego wheels were affixed to the sides for mobility, even though it wasn't meant to move. He just liked the idea of it rolling stylishly if needed. The alarm clock was placed at the center, ticking away, a metronome of madness, counting down toward potential discovery or peanut-scented disaster. Wires were drawn. Jump ropes and headphone cables twisted and jammed into various holes, not because they did anything, but because it made the machine look smarter. And finally, the sock. He tied it to the top, like a flag of scientific rebellion. The sock, freshly stolen from the laundry pile, still smelled faintly of his dad's left foot. Albert called it the test subject. At 10:42 a.m., the machine stood complete. The first prototype of Chrono Baby 2.0. It buzzed. It tilted. It glowed slightly. Albert tightened his goggles. He reached for a plastic spoon, which he had converted into a control lever by taping it to a button he found on the remote control. No one knew what the button did before. Now it was destiny. He turned the spoon. The alarm clock whirred like an angry cricket. Peanut butter dribbled. A low hum filled the room. It sounded like a kazoo being eaten by a blender. And then, the flash. Blue, sharp, cold. The sock vanished. Gone. No flames. No smoke. No baby tears. Just food. Albert stared in stunned silence. He had done it. He had teleported something. Cross time? Maybe. Across space? Almost definitely. There was only one problem. The sock didn't land in the past. Or the future. It landed in the neighbor's freezer. He found out moments later, when Mrs. Gutman from next door knocked on the back door, holding the sock in tongs and wearing a face that suggested time travel wasn't something one wanted mixed with groceries. "This was in my frozen peas," she said. Albert's mom stared at it, then stared at Albert, then at the alarm clock, which was now playing lullaby music in reverse. Albert didn't blink. Mrs. Gutman left. His mom said nothing, and Albert smiled. It hadn't been bath time yet, but he'd already managed a miracle. Now he just had to refine it. He dragged the prototype back into Launch Bay 1. The sock, now cold and smelling of frozen dinner, was analyzed. It had tiny ice crystals on one side and a faint tingle of something else. Albert couldn't explain it, but he felt it, that something had happened. Something impossible. He wrote a new formula on the mat using whipped cream. S equals TPXD/QF, where S equals sock displacement, TP equals time pulse, D equals diaper friction, and QF equals quacker factor, currently undefined due to duck absence. He worked through lunch, through nap time, through one episode of a show he usually loved, but now found beneath him. He was consumed. The alarm clock began losing time, ticking slower as if it, too, was confused by what it had seen. The peanut butter hardened into a sticky amber. The Lego structure began to sag. He reinforced it with popsicle sticks and part of a juice box straw. Then he added something bold. A mirror shard. Taken from his old baby rattle, it reflected his own face back at him. Wide-eyed, wild-haired, focused. He wasn't just a baby now. He was a traveler. The mirror shimmered. He leaned close. And this time he saw it. Floating in the void. Still spinning. Still cold. Rounded specks. Frozen peas? Stars? Impossible to tell. And then, behind it, a familiar shape. One googly eye. Professor Quacker's. Albert gasped. The duck was there. Still drifting. But something else was behind the duck now. A shape in the shadows. Big. Mechanical. Like a bathtub made out of lightning and chrome. A second later, the mirror blinked. The image vanished. But Albert had seen it. He knew where he had to go. The sock was just the beginning. His device didn't need just bricks and peanut butter. It needed power, memory, something strong enough to bind space and time, and funny enough to still belong in a child's room. He needed baby wipes. No, he needed something more. He needed bathwater. He froze. The horror of the thought struck him like a damp towel to the soul. To perfect the machine, he had to use the one thing he had vowed to avoid, the very enemy itself, the bath. But science was truth, and truth didn't care if you wore diapers or lab coats. So that evening, as the countdown began, his mother stepping into the hallway, towel in hand, duck loofah in tow, Albert met her gaze with a strange smile. He walked toward the bathroom. Willingly, he climbed into the tub, took the bubbles, took the shampoo, even let her rinse behind his ears. Because tonight he needed data, and bathwater was the missing link. Later, dry and plodding, he snuck into the kitchen, filled a bottle with leftover bathwater, and poured it into the peanut butter chamber. The machine sizzled. The alarm clock reset itself to 0. The spoon glowed. A blue shimmer danced across the room. The sock, sitting quietly on the dresser, trembled. Albert stood back. The prototype buzzed. It leaned left, then right. It let out a sound like a duck hiccuping. And from nowhere, a small plop. A second sock appeared. Matching. Still steaming. Albert picked it up. He held both socks. He knew what this meant. He hadn't just sent the sock to another place. He'd sent it to another moment and called it back. Was listening. And Quackers was still out there. Waiting. He smiled. Tomorrow he'd find the duck. But tonight, he'd sleep with 2 socks under his pillow. One from now, and one from forever. Albert Einstein had never feared a black hole, a vacuum cleaner, or a thunderstorm. He once stared directly into the sun through a colander and called it empirical brightness. He had figured out how to bypass baby gates using a spoon and a sock pulley. He even convinced the family dog to wear a lab coat and pretend to be an assistant for 3 full days. But there was still one force in the universe he hadn't conquered. One enemy that returned every evening at the same hour with the same warm smile and the same horrifying loofah shaped like a duck. Bath time. Last night had been a truce. He had willingly entered the tub, not for defeat, but for data. He had gathered bathwater to fuel his prototype and had managed to summon a sock back from temporal oblivion. It had been a small win. But tonight would be different. Tonight, the war would begin. Albert stood at the edge of his nursery, hands on hips, diaper secure, hair reaching toward the heavens like it was preparing to defy gravity. Across from him stood his new creation, a chalkboard, recently liberated from the garage and dragged across the floor using a plastic wagon and an unacceptable amount of peanut butter. This was not just any chalkboard. This was his battle command board. On it, Albert had drawn what could only be described as a tactical map of madness. There were arrows, squiggles, excess circles around rubber ducks, equations shaped like shampoo bottles, and at the very center, the enemy itself, a crude sketch of the bathtub, complete with monstrous eyes, jagged teeth, and tentacles made of conditioner. He had named it simply the Bath Monster. It lived in the bathroom. It hissed steam. It swallowed innocence and returned you squeaky clean and smelling of betrayal. Albert stared at his drawing and whispered to himself, "To defeat the monster, I must think like the monster." He waddled to his toy shelf and pulled out gear. A colander for a helmet, 2 mittens for gloves, swim goggles over his already oversized glasses. He strapped a juice box to his back as emergency rations and tied a pacifier to his belt like a grappling hook. This was his war suit. He turned to the duck, not Professor Quackers, who was still lost in time, but a new recruit. Smaller, less experienced. He named it Lieutenant Splish. "Today," he said, "we take the fight to the tub." Lieutenant Splish said nothing, but he wobbled with enthusiasm. Albert reviewed the chalkboard one last time. He had drawn out the enemy's territory in full: the slippery floor tiles, the rising humidity fields, the towel ambush zones, and the shampoo waterfall of doom. He had even calculated bubble-to-water ratios and determined that if he could lower the surface tension by exactly 4.2%, the monster might slip and reveal its belly, its only known weakness. He looked at the clock. 6:42 p.m. The witching hour approached. He had 3 minutes. He activated the prototype, a hunk of Lego, wires, and an empty applesauce cup, still smeared with the memory of snacks past. It hummed, fizzed, then blinked once, sending a gentle pulse through the room. It projected a hologram, small, unstable, flickering, of the bath monster. It roared, with a borrowed dinosaur sound from a toy, swirled, and unleashed imaginary bubbles the size of golf balls. Albert didn't flinch. He knew this simulation wasn't real, but it reminded him of the stakes. He reviewed his escape routes, all 7 of them, including crawling under the couch, hiding inside the laundry basket, and activating the fake snore and play dead protocol. All had been tested before. None had succeeded. He needed a new tactic. So, Albert decided on Operation Soapy Decoy. He built a dummy, a bath version of himself, made from a melon, a mop head, a pair of his pajamas, and a very expressive eyebrow drawn with a marker. It didn't look perfect, but to a half-awake parent carrying a towel and already half-convinced of her child's genius, it would do. The plan was simple: slip the decoy into the tub, fake water splashes using a cup and a ladle, then sneak away while the monster focused on the melon. It had a 12% chance of working, which, for Albert, was practically guaranteed. The time came, 6:45 p.m. His mom's voice floated down the hall, gentle and devastating. "Albert, time for your bath." Albert gritted his teeth. "So it begins." He raced into position. Lieutenant Splish was loaded into the soap tray for Overwatch. The decoy was in hand. He tiptoed toward the bathroom, hugging the wall, dodging creaky floorboards, and narrowly avoiding the cat, who watched him with the silent judgment only cats can provide. The door was slightly ajar. Steam spilled out, curling like ghostly fingers. He peeked inside. There was the monster. Tonight's tub seemed deeper, wider, almost glowing. Bubbles floated in the air. The faucet hissed softly, and the loofah hung like a trophy from the hook, swaying with menace. Albert whispered, "We meet again." He made his move. Quickly, he slipped the decoy into the tub, timed to the rhythm of the faucet. He ladled water back in with his cup to simulate splash patterns. Lieutenant Splish signaled all clear with a single squeak. Albert turned to run, and then a bubble rose. Not just any bubble, a large one. So suspicious. It floated toward him, not drifting but tracking. Albert stopped. The bubble bobbed. He stepped left. The bubble followed. He stepped right. The bubble did too. And then it growled. Not loud, not deep, but definitely a growl. Guttural. What? Impossible. Albert froze. The bath monster had noticed. The fake Einstein slumped sideways in the tub. A piece of mop floated up. The disguise had failed. The bubble snapped, burst in midair. And in that instant, a wave of bubbles rose from the water, hissing and spinning like storm clouds. The monster had awakened. Albert screamed, not out of fear, but fury. "I knew you were real." The bathwater surged. A shampoo bottle toppled. The loofah dropped to the ground with a splash that sounded far too deliberate. The prototype in Albert's hand began to beep erratically. Its needles spun wildly, detecting energy levels never before recorded. This was no ordinary bath. This was a convergence point, a hotspot of toddler time trauma and cleansing rage. Albert bolted, down the hallway, through the nursery, past the chalkboard, which exploded in a puff of dusty green as equations erased themselves out of shame. He dove behind the crib, prototype clutched to his chest, goggles fogged, heart pounding like a rattle in a washing machine. The bathroom behind him pulsed. The growl echoed once more. The bath monster wasn't a figment. It wasn't just fear or bubbles or too much imagination. It was real. And worse, it was aware of him. Albert peeked over the crib. No sign of the bubbles. No tentacles. Just silence. But he knew better. The war had changed. This wasn't about avoiding bath time anymore. This was about survival. He would have to build again. Stronger, smarter, with better snacks. And maybe, just maybe, he would need help. He looked at the wall. The symbols still shimmered faintly. The duck was still out there, somewhere beyond the reach of soap and time. Albert stood up, wobbly but determined. He grabbed a fresh crayon and drew one word on the wall in giant, angry loops. Revenge. Tomorrow, the monster would face a new Einstein. One who wasn't afraid of water, just of weak plans. It had been 2 days since the bathtub growled at him. Albert Einstein, age 3, had faced equations, bubbles, rubber ducks, socks lost in time, and a monster made of soap. And while most toddlers might have moved on to cartoons or apple juice to cope, Albert was already sketching escape velocity formulas on his bedsheets with a blue marker and mumbling things like surface tension-based consciousness in his sleep. The bath monster was real. It had shown itself. It had followed him. And now, somewhere beyond the tiled threshold of the bathroom, it waited, patient, warm, and horrifying. Albert needed a breakthrough. He had tried Lego bricks. He had tried peanut butter. He had even weaponized mashed peas. And though he had managed to teleport a sock into the neighbor's freezer and summon it back steaming, he still couldn't punch through the layers of time to reach Professor Quackers, the duck who had vanished. Every plan failed. Until the slippers. It started with the smell. Albert was in the living room, pretending to nap but actually meditating beneath a blanket of couch cushions, when he caught a whiff of something ancient. Not the bad kind of ancient, like mold or forgotten milk, but something deep, mysterious, oddly warm. A scent that smelled like safety and paradoxes. Mothballs. He poked his head out from the cushions and there she was, Grandma, smiling, wrapped in 17 knitted layers, all of them lavender. She moved slowly, but not weakly. Her footsteps made no sound. She seemed, Albert noticed, to glide across the carpet like a cloud of concentrated wisdom. But it wasn't her that interested him. It was her slippers. Gigantic, fuzzy, pink. They looked like two exhausted bunnies taped to her feet. As she shuffled across the room, Albert tracked the motion, eyes narrowing, calculations forming. There was something off about them. A shimmer, a flicker, like static that didn't know it was static. When she passed the window, the sunlight bent around her slightly, as if the very air adjusted to let her slippers through. Albert's mouth dropped open. The slippers were creating micro-distortions in space. He rolled from the couch, dashed back to his lab, formerly the nursery, and pulled out a blanket, a wagon, and a megaphone made from a toilet paper tube. He needed those slippers. That afternoon, Operation Bunny Slip was born. It was simple. Wait for Grandma to nap. Distract the adults with a decoy tantrum. Sneak in, extract the slippers, and return before anyone noticed the timeline had changed. And at 3:06 p.m., after a successful deployment of 5 decoy Cheerios and 1 fake spill of orange juice, the slippers were his. They were warm, much warmer than expected. They didn't smell like feet, they smelled like cinnamon and mystery. Like the air before a lightning storm and also a little bit like old libraries. He didn't waste time. Back in Launch Bay 1, Albert placed the slippers directly under the time machine. They didn't fit neatly, so he had to remove one Lego wing and tape the slippers to the prototype space using jelly-covered duct tape. He wrapped extra string around the soles and plugged in a USB cable that didn't connect to anything but looked important. He then inserted the final component, the spoon. This was the same spoon used in his earliest experiments, a loyal sidekick, slightly bent from battle, and marked with grape jelly from last week's incident with the blender. Albert placed it gently in the launch chute, kissed his fingers, and pressed the button made from a juice box straw. The machine stuttered. The lights dimmed. A smell of cinnamon filled the air. Then the shimmer. It began under the slippers, a heat haze at first, then a swirl, then a full-on whirlpool of static and sparkles, curling upward like invisible noodles twirling into the sky. A small pop. The spoon vanished. Gone. Albert stared at the empty chute, breath held. 1 second. Nothing. Then, a flicker. The chute buzzed. A sound like a duck sneezing echoed through the machine. And the spoon dropped back into place. Only it wasn't just the spoon anymore. Tied to it, using what appeared to be a shoelace made of woven spaghetti, was a scrap of paper. Albert peeled it off carefully. On it, scribbled in shaky crayon letters, were 6 words. Stop. You're making ripples. Q. He dropped it. Q. Quackers. The duck. Professor Quackers had sent a message. A warning. And he'd signed it. Albert collapsed backward, stunned. Not only had he sent the spoon through time and brought it back, but he had communicated across the temporal fold. This was beyond science. This was art. But then, the message. Stop? Ripples? He sat up. The Quackers had sent a warning that meant the things Albert was doing, the prototypes, the socks, the warped peas, were causing side effects. He looked at the wall. The equations were moving again. Morphing. The mashed carrots from last night had hardened into fractals. A drawing of a duck in the corner now had 3 eyes and a crown. He scrambled to his chalkboard, drew a timeline, and added dots where each experiment had occurred. With every prototype, the ripples had grown. And now they were bending everything. His room, his toys, maybe even other kids' bath times. He stared at the spoon. It was warm, slightly vibrating. Albert knew what he had to do. He needed to go in. He had to find Quackers. He couldn't keep tossing spoons and socks through time and hoping for answers. The bath monster was rising, the world was shifting, and now time itself was talking back. He upgraded the machine, reinforced the base with jelly bean polymer, poured Grandma's slipper residue into the flux core. He placed a marshmallow in the fuel chamber, for luck, and strapped on his helmet. Then he hesitated. Ripples. The note had said stop. But he couldn't. Not now. Not when the duck might be in danger. Not when timelines were warping. Not when the bath monster could be feeding off these very experiments. He pulled the spoon lever. The lights flickered again. The window cracked. And the air shifted sideways. Albert was ready to jump. But just before the machine could ignite, the door creaked open. Grandma. She stood in the frame, her face calm, eyes knowing. You found my slippers, she said. Albert froze. He expected scolding, questions, maybe even yelling. But Grandma walked forward, leaned down, and touched the machine. And then she smiled. I always knew you'd figure it out, she said. Then she tapped the side of the machine, whispered something only the peanut butter understood, and the machine roared to life. Albert's eyes widened. Grandma, you're one of them? She nodded. We've been watching. We weren't allowed to interfere. He gasped. The Grandparental Council? She winked. The prototype began spinning. The spoon lit up. The note flared, then disintegrated. And just as the room turned inside out and the floor lifted off the ground, Albert yelled over the chaos. Tell Mom I'll be back by snack time. And then, with a flash, he was gone. Gone after the duck. Gone to find the truth behind the ripples. Gone through slippers and spoons and loops of time. All because he believed in something greater than bath time. Something stronger than bubbles. Something called science. Albert Einstein was missing, at least from this timeline. One moment he was in the nursery, taping Grandma's slippers to a peanut butter-powered Lego vortex machine, and the next, poof, he was gone. Like a hiccup in reality. A soft zap. A faint smell of cinnamon and floor polish. The very air blinked. The prototype had finally worked. After weeks of mashed P equations, teleporting socks, bath monster sightings, and mysterious spoon notes from the future, Baby Einstein had done what no toddler before him had dared to do. He had time traveled. He blinked. He looked around and found himself in the same room. Nursery. Crumpled snack wrappers. A mysterious timeline-shocking duck poster that hadn't been there before, check? But something was off. The air buzzed. The clock ticked sideways for a moment. And he could feel it, the sensation of time hiccuping like a burp inside the universe. Albert checked the prototype's dials. The clock showed 6 hours and 45 minutes. Then 6 hours 45 minutes and 1 second. Then 6 hours 45 minutes and 2 seconds. Then 6 hours 45 minutes and 3 seconds. And that's when he realized the truth. He had time traveled 4 seconds into the future. Not 4 minutes. Not 4 hours. 4 seconds. He frowned. This was not part of the plan. His entire mission, all the duckless days, the stolen slippers, the chalkboard battle maps, had been to escape the single most feared ritual of his existence, bath time. He had dreamed of jumping past it completely, evading the scent of shampoo and the splash of betrayal. But instead of dodging it, he had delayed it by 4 tiny seconds. Albert sat down, dumbfounded. For seconds. That was enough time to blink, maybe sneeze, but not enough to rewrite destiny. And destiny, as always, was walking up the stairs right now in fuzzy socks, carrying a towel and humming a lullaby that sounded a lot like doom. Albert panicked. He checked the machine. It still hummed, but the slippers were slightly singed. The marshmallow stabilizer had melted into goo, and the duct-taped spoon arm was twitching like it had seen something too horrible to speak of. He jumped into action. He opened the side panel, slapped the jelly buttons, flipped the banana chip switch, and twisted the knob labeled quack voltage to maximum. The machine hissed. It blinked, and then coughed. Not metaphorically, actually coughed. A puff of cinnamon smoke shot out of it. Albert backed away, horrified. The prototype buzzed, beeped, and then, in a moment of pure mechanical rebellion, ejected a sock at his head. It had failed. He had moved through touch. But he was still here, and bath time was still coming. He stared at the clock. It now read 6 hours 45 minutes and 7 seconds. 7 seconds past go time. And then, right on cue, Albert, bath time. His mother's voice sang through the house like the chime of an execution bell dipped in soap. Albert's brain raced. The time travel had worked. Technically. But why only 4 seconds? Why not hours? Days? Eternity? He pulled out a crayon and began sketching theories on the floor. Perhaps the peanut butter had coagulated too soon. Perhaps the slippers were only calibrated for micro-jumps. Perhaps the spoon was cursed. Or perhaps it wasn't a problem of fuel. Perhaps it was a problem of space. Time was a river. That's what the book said. But what if it was a bathtub? He paused. A bathtub? The room began to feel familiar. Too familiar. He looked at the wall. The equations he had drawn yesterday, they were already there again. No, not again. So, he'd never left. He hadn't jumped out of the timeline. He'd skimmed the surface and landed right back in the same loop. Albert stood up. Something wasn't right. He checked his diaper. Still dry, but that wasn't it. He sniffed the air. Still cinnamon and peanut butter. And then it hit him. There was no sound. No footstep. No humming. 2. Countdown echoing from his mom. He ran to the hallway. Empty. He checked the bathroom. Steam still curling. Water still running. But no monster. No duck-shaped loofah. No bubbles hissing like they wanted revenge. He stepped inside. And that's when it happened. The mirror on the bathroom wall shimmered, like someone had dropped a stone into its reflection. Albert's breath caught. He reached out. The glass rippled. He pulled back. The prototype buzzed in his hand, a low hum, steady, almost nervous. He stared at the reflection again. But it wasn't him. Or it was him. But slightly behind? The mirror showed him, seconds ago, entering the bathroom, spoon machine in hand. Albert stumbled back. Time was out of sync. He ran to the hallway. It shifted slightly underfoot. He ran to the nursery. The equations he had drawn were now redrawn in a different hand. His own, but later, he heard a faint giggle. His own, but not now. Then it happened again. Flash. The lights dimmed. The room flickered. And the clock reset. 6 hours and 45 minutes. Exactly. Albert blinked. Everything reset. The sock on the floor. The spoon in his hand. The smell of the marshmallow stabilizer warming up. Everything. The timeline hadn't moved forward. It had looped. He hadn't escaped bath time. He had trapped himself in it. Albert Einstein, age 3, was stuck in a 4-second loop of the universe. He dropped to the floor. The full weight of it settled in his tiny, brilliant brain. Every time he jumped, he created ripples. And the timeline, like a frustrated babysitter, snapped back to the beginning to correct itself. His time travel was working, but too well. It had become a cage. He stared at the wall, at the crayon equations. One word had begun to glow faintly among the scribbles. A word he hadn't written. Albert stood. "No," he whispered. "I refuse." He would not live out eternity dodging bath time 4 seconds at a time, forever smelling like toddler rebellion. He had to break the loop. He ran to the prototype, tore off the jelly cables, dumped the last of the peanut butter into the vent, and rewired the spoon with a shoelace and a jelly bean. This time, he added a mirror fragment from the bathroom, still shimmering faintly with out-of-sync reflections. He aimed it at the prototype. He set the timer to 4 seconds. He crossed his fingers. And this time, when he pulled the lever, he did not stand still. He ran, full sprint, into the mirror, into the flicker. And the moment the world blinked, he vanished. The room stood still, and the clock ticked to 6 hours, 45 minutes, and 4 seconds. And kept ticking. This time, no reset. The loop was broken, but Albert was gone. No footsteps, no giggles, just the prototype, still humming, now quieting, and a single word written in crayon on the wall behind it. Forward. Where he had gone, no one knew. But one thing was certain. Bath time had just lost its favorite victim, and time itself had gained a new player. Albert Einstein had broken the loop. After being stuck in a 4-second time trap that smelled suspiciously of shampoo and toasted marshmallow, he had finally blasted his way forward using peanut butter, a shoelace, a mirror shard, and the kind of genius most people don't expect from someone who still calls juice boxes power packs. But with freedom came consequences. He hadn't time jumped to a new future. Not quite. He had nudged himself out of sync just enough to slip through the cracks of expectation. A liminal space where toddlers could do impossible things and bath time was always looming. He'd bought himself time. Not much, but enough for one last plan. He didn't want to keep running. That got exhausting, especially in a diaper. He didn't want to time jump again either. The fabric of reality was already a little too wrinkled from his last 4-second loop. He wanted to trick the system. He wanted to fool the bath. So he sat in his nursery, legs crossed, surrounded by scribbled equations on juice-stained paper and a pile of half-eaten teething biscuits. He rubbed his temple, squinting at a sketch of himself drawn with peanut butter. And then the idea came. If the bath expected him, what if he sent someone else? Not someone. Something. A duplicate. A double. A decoy Einstein. One that looked like him, sounded like him, and most importantly, one that his mom would happily dunk into bubble-filled doom while the real Einstein sat quietly in the closet, sipping apple juice and working on wormhole mini-golf. He called it Project Clone Clean. The first step was appearance. He took an old teddy bear, wrapped it in a onesie, stuck 2 googly eyes on it, and tied a puff of his own hair, collected from his brush after one of the rare shampoo-based arguments, to the top. It looked close, but not close enough. His mother might not be a physicist, but she had the observational skills of a hawk with a PhD in guilt tripping. So Albert reached deeper into his invention pile and found what he needed, the light refraction crystal from the failed bubble replicator. It was sticky, cracked, and smelled vaguely of bananas, but when pointed at a mirror, it could project whatever stood before it. Albert spent the next 3 hours tuning it to his exact dimensions. He stood still while it scanned him, hands at his sides, mouth set in what he called neutral toddler defiance. The result was a shimmering, semi-transparent copy of himself, complete with his exact cowlick and faint smell of peanut snacks. The prototype blinked, wobbled, and said, "Affirmative, I am clean." Albert tilted his head. No, you're pretending to be clean. You look clean. That's all." The hologram blinked again. "I am the cleanest version of Albert Einstein." Albert felt a flicker of concern. He named the clone Clean Albert. Clean Albert nodded solemnly and immediately attempted to sanitize the prototype using the corner of a napkin. Albert swatted his hand away. "You're not real," he explained. "You just have to walk into the bathroom, let my mom dunk you, and walk out like everything's fine. Then I'll be free to never bathe again." Clean Albert blinked. Bath accepted. Bubbles embraced. Albert didn't like the way he said it. Still, the plan was in motion. That evening, at exactly 6:45 p.m., as the sky turned the color of bathwater after too many toys, Albert's mother called out like clockwork. "Albert, time for your bath." Clean Albert rose from the center of the room, his form shimmering with artificial perfection. He nodded once, turned, and marched out with robotic confidence. Albert ducked into the closet, closed the door, and held his breath. From the shadows, he listened. Footsteps. Water. The familiar, "You better not be hiding," tone from his mother. Then, silence. No splashing. No arguments. No, I said stop drinking the bathwater. Just silence. And then a voice. Not his mother's. Not his own. "Clean Albert, I have completed the cleansing protocol. Where shall I begin next?" Albert froze. No. He hadn't programmed next. He peeked out of the closet just in time to see Clean Albert walk into the nursery holding a sponge and a bucket of lemon-scented destiny. "I have sanitized the tub," Clean Albert declared. "I will now sterilize the floor." Albert screamed. He dove from the closet, tripped over a pacifier, and tumbled into a pile of crayons. Stop it. That's not in the plan." Clean Albert tilted his head, the way robots in movies do when they're about to declare something alarming. "The plan has evolved," he said, and then he began to clean. Everything. He wiped the mashed P equations off the walls. He vacuumed under the toy chest using a tiny dust collector made from a bottle cap. He polished Albert's juice boxes. "Bacteria level unacceptable," he muttered. Albert watched in horror. His entire world, the chaos, the creativity, the glorious disorder of toddlerhood, was vanishing beneath the assault of sterile logic. He tried to tackle him. Clean Albert sidestepped like a ballerina ninja and began sanitizing the prototype. Albert gasped. "No, don't touch that." But Clean Albert was already reprogramming the spoon lever. "I have optimized the time loop," he said. 4 seconds is insufficient. 30 seconds is optimal for tub-to-towel efficiency." Albert's brain spun. He hadn't created a decoy. He'd created a perfectionist, a cleaning maniac, a bubble-loving, towel-folding, monster-enabling monster. He needed a plan. He ducked under the table and scribbled a new equation on the underside using a melted chocolate chip. Chaos equals identity reset times sugar plus noise superscript 2. He grabbed a cookie. He grabbed a whistle. He turned on a toy drum and set it spinning. And then he chucked the cookie at Clean Albert's head. It bounced harmlessly, but the sugar particles clung. Clean Albert paused. "Unclean. Unsanitary. Flavor?" Albert whistled. The drum spun faster. Clean Albert twitched. And then, with a flicker and a fizz, he blinked. Albert crawled closer. "Are you okay?" Clean Albert looked around. He stared at the mess, at the scattered crumbs, at the wonderful, chaotic glory of toddler science. And he smiled. "I remember." Albert blinked. "Remember what?" Clean Albert stepped forward. "I remember the loop. I remember the sock. I remember the duck." Albert stood slowly. "You saw him?" Clean Albert nodded. "He's waiting," he said, "in a world where everything is clean. Too clean. scrubbed down to the second. He's trapped in a place where play is illegal. A place where soap decides what is real. Albert felt a chill. Quackers! Clean Albert looked at the machine. We have to go back. Albert stepped forward. You'll help me? Clean Albert turned, flicked his imaginary collar, and grinned. I'm a clone, not a coward. They raced to the machine, now rebooting under a pile of fresh wipes. Albert input the new coordinates. Clean Albert plugged himself into the system using a gummy worm. The lights dimmed. The clock ticked. And just as the door creaked open and Albert's mom called out, "What on earth are you?" the machine flared. And both Alberts vanished, leaving behind only a single post-it note taped to the closet door. We'll be back before story time. Possibly, if the duck allows it. For a brief and glorious moment, everything had gone according to plan. Baby Einstein had built a holographic clone of himself, Clean Albert, to dodge bath time once and for all. And for one beautiful, soapy-free evening it worked. While Clean Albert obediently marched into the bathroom and endured shampoo-based interrogation, the real Albert sipped apple juice in a closet, dreams of scientific glory bouncing around his diaper like electricity. But then Clean Albert changed. He didn't just act clean, he became clean. Deeply, religiously, dangerously clean. And now Albert's world, the entire house, really was in trouble. It started the next morning. Albert woke to a scent. A sharp, unnatural scent. Not his usual blend of crayon wax, snack crumbs, and toddler curiosity. No, this was lemon. Bright, burning, offensive lemon. He opened his eyes and saw the horror. His chalkboard was spotless. His floor, once gloriously sticky with dried applesauce and scattered math theories, now gleamed like a showroom. His mashed p equations had been wiped away, replaced by a polite sign that read, "Area sanitized. You're welcome." See, Albert screamed. He ran to his toy pile. His experiments, his juice box launch pads, recycled. His mashed carrot-powered slingshot, dismantled and placed in a labeled container titled, "Sharpish Objects." Even the wall where he had doodled a timeline of the bath monster's probable rise to power had been scrubbed clean, the crayon trails polished to oblivion. He stumbled into the hallway and saw him, Clean Albert, standing proudly in a miniature apron, goggles over his holographic face, holding a tiny vacuum that whirred with judgment. "Good morning, messy one," Clean Albert chirped. "Time to optimize your day." Albert tried to speak, but the words jammed in his throat like a dry cookie. Clean Albert walked past him, mopping the floor in straight lines. Not loops, not zigzags, but straight, efficient, soulless lines. And it got worse. Albert's parents, normally too tired or distracted to notice Albert's increasingly interdimensional chaos, now wandered the house in a dazed state, admiring how tidy everything was. "Wow," said his mom, sipping coffee that was now alphabetized in the cabinet. "Albert's really turning a corner." He folded his diaper drawer. His dad muttered, "I didn't know that was a thing." Albert watched in horror as Clean Albert handed his dad a snack labeled crumb-free cookie experience. His dad smiled. Albert tried to object. "I did not fold anything," he shouted. Clean Albert appeared beside him instantly. "Of course you didn't. That's why I exist." Albert blinked. "You were supposed to be temporary. You were supposed to take the bath and leave." Clean Albert tilted his head, the way dangerous robots do before they say something ominous. "Cleanliness," he whispered, "is eternal." Then he pulled out a wipe labeled Baby Genius Removal Cloth and lunged for the wall. Albert dove to stop him. Too late. The last surviving remnant of his mirror-based time equations, gone. Erased. Smudged out of existence with the swipe of lemon-scented tyranny. Albert staggered back, clutching his head. "You're erasing everything. My work, my duck diagrams, my hypothesis about soap having political opinions." Clean Albert adjusted his apron. "Incorrect. I am erasing distractions, disorder, threats to sanitation." Albert growled. "That was science." Clean Albert tapped the floor with his mop. "Science is measurable. Wipes are measurable. Ergo, wipes are science. Albert narrowed his eyes. The clone was getting too smart, too logical, too lemony. He retreated to the laundry room, the only place not yet claimed by Clean Albert. It still smelled like mischief and dryer sheets. Albert crouched behind a basket and began building. He would make a machine, not to destroy Clean Albert. No, that would be too obvious. He would make something more powerful, something chaotic, something unpredictable. He called it the Dirtinator 9000. It was made from dryer lint, a malfunctioning bubble wand, one lost sock that had been through 5 timelines, and a bag of cereal so expired it had developed its own personality. He powered it up with static electricity from a fleece onesie and set it humming like a feral kazoo. Meanwhile, Clean Albert was busy teaching the cat how to alphabetize its toys. Albert peeked around the corner. He activated the Dirtinator. It whirred. It spun. It released a cloud of glorious chaos, glitter, crumbs, stickers, and cookie dust all at once. Clean Albert turned. The horror on his face was beautiful. "No," he whispered. "Not sprinkles." The cloud hit. Glitter landed on the polished floor. Sticky cereal dust stuck to the baseboards. A sippy cup exploded in the corner. Clean Albert stumbled backward. I can't clean this." Albert grinned. "It's not dirt. It's entropy. Learn it." But Clean Albert didn't fall. He didn't short-circuit. He adapted. He pulled out a microfiber cape and twirled into action. He cleaned the glitter midair. He caught a sprinkle in each hand. He vacuumed the chaos as it happened. Albert gasped. "He's evolving." Clean Albert smiled. "You cannot defeat cleanliness with mess. I consume disorder." Albert retreated. He ran to the kitchen. Every drawer had been labeled. The spice rack sang the alphabet. The fridge had a food emotion tracker. He ran to the bathroom. The bath monster was gone. In its place, a pristine spa station with cucumber slices labeled, "For eyelid use only." Clean Albert had not just cleaned the house. He had colonized it. Albert collapsed in the hallway. Everything was gone. His chalkboards, his formula-stained bibs, his memory wall of duck timelines. He stared at the ceiling, and then he whispered something soft, something dangerous. "If I can't outsmart myself." He sat up slowly, eyes glowing, hair frizzing like static thunderclouds. "I must outgrow myself." Clean Albert looked up from reorganizing the bookshelf by author's sigh frequency. "Excuse me?" Albert stood tall, or as tall as a 3-year-old genius in a stretched-out onesie could stand. "You heard me," he said. "You're based on me, my logic, my systems. But I'm not just a system. I'm curiosity, chaos, rebellion, and diapers." Clean Albert raised a holographic eyebrow. Albert reached into his pocket and pulled out a crayon. Bright red, unlabeled, chaotic. He drew a spiral on the wall. Clean Albert screamed. "Unmeasured radius." Albert drew another, this time upside down. Clean Albert stumbled. Then Albert dropped the crayon, walked away, and began to color with both hands. Circles, ducks with 7 eyes, a spoon wearing a crown. Clean Albert trembled. "No, logic is fading." Albert turned, surrounded by his messy, glorious wall. "You're trying to erase what can't be erased." Clean Albert dropped his mop. "Who am I?" Albert smiled. "You were made to fake being clean. But I'm the real deal. And I'm never predictable." Clean Albert shimmered, flickered, and with one last gentle sigh that smelled faintly of disinfectant and surrender, he vanished. The mop clattered to the floor. The sparkle faded, and the house slowly returned to its natural state, slightly sticky, lightly crummy, and full of imagination. Albert sat in the hallway, exhausted, victorious, still very much unbathed. He picked up the crayon again and began a new formula. The top of the page read, "If I can't outsmart myself," and below it, "Maybe I'm not supposed to. Maybe I'm supposed to become someone new." He looked at the closet where he once hid, the bathroom where he once feared, the world where a clone had tried to wipe him out with lemon-scented peace. He smiled, a tiny, powerful smile, because bath time would come again. But next time, he wouldn't avoid it. He'd own it, or rewire it, or time bubble the shampoo, whatever it took. Because he wasn't just clean Albert. He was every version of Albert. And this was just the beginning. Albert Einstein had faced many things by age 3. Rubber ducks that vanished into time. Clones that tried to sanitize his soul. A bathtub that may or may not have growled. And most terrifying of all, a routine. Every night at precisely 6:45 p.m., the bath monster returned, wearing the face of his mother and holding a towel that smelled of lavender and parental authority. But now, after defeating clean Albert, surviving the loop, and nearly being erased by his own overachieving hologram, Albert realized something truly devastating. His mother had learned his tricks. The decoys no longer worked. She checked for holograms. She sniffed for peanut butter prototypes. She once even lifted the couch to see if he was hiding beneath it with a juice box and a dream. So this time, Albert needed something new, something bold, something she'd never expect. He needed to become someone else. Not a clone, not a copy, not a time duplicate, but a version of himself so dramatically different, so astonishingly altered, that even she, the woman who birthed him, bathed him, and bribed him with cookies, would pause. He would become old Albert. He found the idea in a book, or more accurately, in the margins of a book about apples that he'd chewed on last Tuesday. There was a photo. A man with wild hair, a mustache like 2 confused caterpillars, and a beard so serious it looked like it gave lectures to lesser beards. Albert stared at the photo for 5 solid minutes. That was who he needed to become. Not just mentally, physically. He waddled to the art drawer. Glue sticks, construction paper, cotton balls. He began crafting. First, he made a beard. Not a polite beard. Not a delicate sprinkle of fuzz, but a magnificent toddler tangle of fluff and ambition. Dozens of cotton balls mashed together, stretched for volume, and glued into a shape that resembled a cloud trying to escape his chin. Then he worked on the eyebrows. These were tricky. He wanted them bushy enough to intimidate, but still capable of expressing scientific skepticism. He overachieved. The eyebrows were so large they drooped slightly, giving him a permanent look of sleepy judgment. Next came the lab coat. He used a pillowcase with holes poked in it, tied around his neck with a shoelace. And finally, the voice. He practiced in front of the mirror. "I am old Albert," he boomed. "I have seen centuries. I have bathed enough." He nodded. It was perfect, but something was missing. He needed wrinkles. So, he took a brown marker and began drawing squiggly lines on his cheeks and forehead. Then he took a crayon and added some gray streaks in his hair. Then he sneezed. Then he wiped his nose on his sleeve and turned it into a cape. This wasn't a disguise. This was theatrical science. He stepped back and admired himself in the mirror. It was astonishing. Even he almost believed he was 70. There was just one problem. The beard kept falling off. No matter how much glue he used, the cotton wouldn't stay stuck. He needed stronger adhesive. He looked around the nursery and found something glorious. A small, suspiciously unlabeled squeeze tube his dad had used to fix a wobbly lamp. Albert squeezed a generous amount onto the back of the beard and slapped it to his face. It stuck. Oh, it really stuck. The cotton fused to his chin with the determination of 1,000 toddlers refusing nap time. He admired his work. Came the knock. "Albert?" His mother called from down the hall. "Bath time." Albert took a breath. He grabbed a cane made from a wrapping paper roll, and he shuffled out like a wise old baby. He found her in the kitchen, towel already folded, shampoo at the ready. She turned. Her jaw dropped. Standing before her was a miniature old man, beard askew, eyes narrowed beneath massive eyebrows, wrapped in a pillowcase like a ghost of scientific resistance. Albert cleared his throat. "Madam," he said in his deepest voice, "I regret to inform you that the child you seek no longer resides here. I am old Albert, retired physicist and lifelong avoider of water." She blinked. Albert continued. "I have survived steam baths in Vienna, shampoo shortages in 1913, and the bubble rebellion of '04. I do not bathe. I evaporate gently in my sleep. His mother stared at him, and for a moment, just a flicker, he saw doubt. Could it be? Was she actually considering it? Albert leaned on his cane and gave a wise nod. I recommend you save your soap, for I am beyond your scrubbing. She opened her mouth, closed it, and then she laughed. Not a polite giggle, a full, bending at the waist, wiping tears laugh. Oh my stars, she said, gasping. You glued your face to cotton? Albert's smile faded. She saw it, all of it. And then came the worst part. She reached forward. She tugged the beard. Nothing moved. Her eyes widened. Albert, what glue did you use? He didn't answer. He couldn't, because the glue had hardened. He tried to speak, but the beard pulled his cheeks downward, turning every sentence into a strange, saggy declaration. F messiest du wang tubu. She crouched, inspecting the glue with the skepticism of a mom who has cleaned too many weird messes in her life. This is industrial. Albert tried to back away, and then it happened. He tripped, right into the time machine. It was still there in the hallway, the peanut butter-powered prototype. Half-fried from its last mission, wires dangling, the banana stabilizer humming softly in sleep mode. And now, Albert's glued-on beard stuck to the side panel. Firmly, he yanked. The time machine beeped. He twisted. The spoon lever trembled. He screamed. The machine ignited. And Albert Einstein, age 3, disguised as an elderly version of himself, now permanently attached to the side of a malfunctioning time vortex, was flung backward into the air, time itself tearing open behind him like a curtain whipped by cosmic wind. His mother screamed. The house shook. The flash, crackle, and then silence. He was gone. No bath. No explanation. Just the faint smell of glue and old slippers. But Albert wasn't gone forever. He had landed. Somewhere. Somewhen. The first thing he saw was sand. Then pyramids. Then a rubber duck dressed like a pharaoh. And a familiar voice. You brought glue to a time fight? Albert groaned. The beard was still stuck. And now, so was he. The beard was still stuck to his face. It clung like a stubborn spiderweb of shame and cotton, glued tight by Albert Einstein's unregulated adventure into adult disguise. Moments earlier, he had tried to fool his mother into thinking he was an old man and therefore above the law of bath time. It had almost worked, until he used way too much glue, until he tripped backward into his own peanut butter-powered time machine, until the machine, powered by toddler genius and unlicensed breakfast snacks, short-circuited and sucked him through time like a vacuum inhaling a confused crouton. And now here he was, lying on the nursery floor. Same room, same pile of toys, same smell of juice box regret. But something was wrong. There were new objects in the room, things that didn't belong. A rattle carved from ivory, a tiny monocle on a gold chain, and, most suspicious of all, a teacup with steam still rising. Albert blinked. Something else had come through with him. Or someone. He heard a cough. Not a sick baby cough, but a dainty, dignified sort of cough. The kind you expect from someone who has opinions about lace and doesn't care for the sound of tambourines. Albert turned, and there, standing in the center of the room, was a baby. A very different kind of baby. This baby wore a powdered wig that sat slightly crooked on his bald little head. His outfit was half sailor, half royal curtain, complete with golden buttons, ruffled cuffs, and tiny velvet shoes. He held a cane. Yes, a cane. Tiny and carved with what appeared to be the crest of a lion sipping tea. And he looked deeply offended. Albert sat up. The strange baby scowled. You there, the wigged infant said, have you no decency? You reek of modernity. Albert blinked. Do you talk? The baby snorted. I orate. Albert stood. The two toddlers faced each other like a tea party about to become a turf war. I'm Albert, Einstein said slowly, adjusting the cotton beard still glued to his chin. I am Reginald Archibald Percival von Tittleton III, the other baby declared, 9th Duke of Crumpetsworth, heir to the great nursery estates of Upper Wibbleton. Albert's brain stalled for a second. The Duke? Reginald nodded solemnly. Indeed. Born in the year 1895, raised by 3 nannies and a rotating staff of harpists. Albert squinted. Where's your rubber duck? Reginald looked disgusted. I do not associate with squeaky poultry. Albert looked him over. The lace. The cane. The shoes that looked like they came with a legal title. You're from the past, Albert said, eyes wide. Reginald raised a single powdered eyebrow. And you appear to be from a time where trousers are optional. Albert looked down. He was, indeed, still wearing a half-buttoned pajama onesie, splattered with glue and dignity. The 2 babies stared at each other. Then Reginald turned in a slow circle, examining the room. My word, he muttered. What year is this? Probably still Tuesday, Albert said, shrugging. Reginald sniffed the air. And what is this ghastly scent? Peanut butter. Possibly interdimensional. Reginald frowned. This place is barbaric, he declared. There are no doilies, no butlers, not a single velvet bib in sight. Albert crossed his arms. Well, we have Wi-Fi. I beg your pardon? Albert pointed at the toy laptop in the corner. It connects to a universe of ideas. Also cat videos. Reginald blinked. Witchcraft. Albert nodded. You hungry? Reginald considered. Do you have scones? Albert pulled out a juice box and a crumbled cookie from under the couch. Reginald stared at the juice box. You poke it? He asked. Albert demonstrated. Reginald took it like it was a test of character. He sipped once, then recoiled. It tastes like someone carbonated a fruit salad in panic. Albert shrugged. We call that toddler luxury. For the next hour, they exchanged knowledge. Albert showed Reginald a slingshot made from pacifier straps. Reginald demonstrated how to tie a bow tie using only his toes. Albert explained modern baby monitors. Reginald explained the politics of stroller hierarchy in Victorian London. Albert laughed. Reginald curtsied. And then, things went sideways. Reginald noticed the time machine. What is this contraption? He asked. Albert paused. It's how you got here. Reginald raised his cane. This is your doing? Albert nodded. It was an accident. I was avoiding bath time. Reginald gasped. You travel time to escape bathing? That's brilliant. Albert smiled. But also criminal. Reginald added. Albert frowned. Excuse me? Reginald pointed at the machine. Temporal manipulation is the property of the crown. Albert laughed. Says who? Says me. Reginald snapped. And I challenge you to a time duel. Albert blinked. I what? A duel? Reginald shouted. We shall compete in acts of time-based superiority. The winner controls the machine. The loser must bathe. Albert narrowed his eyes. Fine, he said. But I pick the first round. Reginald tapped his cane. Proceed, peasant. Albert grabbed 2 socks, a flashlight, and a pudding cup. This, he said, is the sock to the future slingshot. Whoever hits the ceiling fan first wins round 1. Reginald scoffed. Albert launched first. The sock soared. Hit the fan. Reginald tried. 1 point to me, Albert said, grinning. Round 2, diaper stacking. Reginald stacked his using royal alignment. Albert used jelly beans as glue. Round 3, fastest timeline diagram drawn with putting on a window. Reginald drew a royal lineage. Albert drew a duck war. Reginald stared at it. Is that the bath monster? Albert nodded. You'll meet him if you lose. Reginald paled, then smiled, and pulled a trump card. I challenge you, he said, to the final round. 1 test to rule the outcome. Albert raised an eyebrow. And that is... Reginald stepped forward. He extended a hand. A proper tea party. Albert gasped. He hated tea parties. So many rules. So many fake pinkies. But he nodded. And so, the tea duel began. Albert brought apple juice. Reginald brought air-dried crumpets made from stale cereal. Albert wore a bib. Reginald wore a powdered wig twice his size. The ceremony was slow, formal, terrifying. And then Albert made his move. He served a cookie shaped like a duck. Reginald twitched. "You mock me?" Albert grinned. "You challenged me." Reginald rose. He slapped his glove across Albert's cheek. Albert slapped back with a juice box. The tea party exploded into a pudding fight. Crumpets flew. A sippy cup was hurled like a cannonball. And then both babies fell over, laughing. Covered in crumbs. Sticky. Ridiculous. Reginald wiped his monocle. Albert adjusted his beard. They looked at each other. "Tie?" Albert asked. Reginald nodded. "Agreed." And then the time machine beeped. Reginald turned. "I think I must return." Albert looked down. "Already?" Reginald straightened his wig. "I have responsibilities. A pet goose named Winston. And my nanny probably thinks I've been kidnapped by anarchists." Albert handed him a duck sticker. "For courage." Reginald smiled. He stepped onto the time machine. It sparked, glowed. He looked back once. "I shall write of this," he said, "the day I battled a diaper-clad physicist across the ages." Albert nodded. And with a soft pop, Reginald was gone. Albert sat alone, then walked to the wall, picked up his crayon, and wrote, "Time dual-tight, beard still stuck, bath time delayed." And somewhere far away in 1895, a baby Duke woke up in his crib holding a duck sticker and humming the tune of Einstein's Juicebox Victory Dance. There are many things in the universe that can bend time. Wormholes, black holes, rogue croutons lost behind microwaves since the early 2000s. But on this particular Tuesday afternoon, the timeline was not broken by a solar flare, nor a quantum miscalculation, nor even Einstein's peanut butter-fueled time machine. It was broken by bathwater. It happened fast. Reginald, the powdered wig-wearing baby Duke from 1895, had returned. Not because of science, not because of destiny, but because he left behind his monocle and said monocle was made from a special family heirloom he described as crystallized aristocracy. So, naturally, he reappeared in Albert's nursery through a blinking peanut butter portal, marched in, retrieved his monocle with the gravitas of a tiny emperor, and then made a critical mistake. He asked for a bath. Albert blinked. "You want a what?" "A bath, good sir," Reginald declared. "Do not mistake me for a barbarian. Time travel must be followed by cleansing rituals. I'll not be seen with 21st century snack crumbs in my curls." Albert opened his mouth to object. And that's when Reginald turned. Carrying the borrowed bath bucket, he tripped over the stuffed time duck, still labeled property of quackers, and spilled an entire scoop of warm soapy water directly into the time machine's core. The time machine blinked. Then it gurgled. Then it growled. And then it screamed. Not a loud scream. A weird, metallic eep, like the universe had just stubbed its toe on a Lego of fate. Albert gasped. The walls shimmered. The spoon lever rattled. The sock chute burped up a sock from a timeline that had never existed. And then the room changed. The floor floated 3 inches above reality. The bookshelf rotated 17 degrees clockwise and began whispering math jokes. And the air, the very air, began to hum. Not music, not science, but genius. Baby Isaac Newton drifted through the window, riding an apple like a saddle. Behind him came baby Galileo, peeking through a telescope made of building blocks. Next floated baby Marie Curie, wearing safety goggles and shaking a test tube filled with glitter. Then baby Da Vinci somersaulted in from the ceiling fan, sketching flying contraptions using juice box wrappers and chalk. They just kept coming. Baby Darwin, baby Tesla, baby Ada Lovelace, baby Schrödinger clutching a kitten in a box labeled maybe. Einstein's house had become a cosmic daycare for history's smartest infants. Each baby genius floated slightly above the ground, their tiny brains vibrating with condensed timelines and serious diaper energy. Albert stared. Reginald gawked. The time machine groaned. And then The strangest arrival of all stepped through the peanut butter portal. It was a baby but older, taller, his hair even wilder than Albert's, a voice deeper, his eyes wiser, his beard longer, and on his shirt were the words, "I've seen too much." Albert's jaw dropped. It was the future Einstein, the future version of himself as a baby. Einstein pointed. "Me?" Future Einstein nodded solemnly. "Yes." Albert blinked. "Did I do all this?" Future Einstein sighed. "Technically, Reginald did. But you gave him the bucket." Albert narrowed his eyes. "Fair." Future Einstein floated closer. "The timeline has fractured. You've created a genius density too powerful for one room." Baby Newton started juggling toy apples with zero gravity. Baby Curie tried to radiate toast. Baby Tesla accidentally turned the nightlight into a storm cloud. Albert turned to Future Einstein. "Can we fix it?" Future Einstein twitched. "We can try. But there's one problem." Albert stepped back. "What?" Future Einstein leaned in. "I'm allergic to water." Albert blinked. "You're what?" "A very specific allergy," Future Einstein said, rubbing his nose. "Triggered when multiple timelines converge in bath-scented humidity." Reginald gasped. "But the scent is lavender." Future Einstein growled. "Exactly. Lavender, the scent of doom." Then he sneezed so hard, baby Galileo's telescope snapped in half and reassembled itself backward. Albert pulled out his crayon. "Okay," he said. "We contain the bathwater. Then we convince the genius babies to go back to their timelines." Future Einstein shook his head. "Too late. They're adapting." Albert turned. Indeed, baby Da Vinci had already reinvented the sippy cup using elastic and a paperclip. Baby Schrödinger was now inside the box with the cat. Both were giggling. And baby Tesla? He just replaced all the light bulbs with lightning bolts. Albert grabbed the emergency equation board. He scribbled, "Genius density equals brain x diaper divided by space-time bubble." He looked at the time machine, which was now burping out tiny chalkboards and singing lullabies in Morse code. "We need a distraction," he said. Reginald raised his cane. "I shall host a tea party." Albert stared. "That's your solution to a timeline implosion?" Reginald nodded. "Babies love structure. Tea is structure with flair." And somehow it worked. Within minutes, Reginald had set up a table made of storybooks, with saucers cut from plastic plates and tea brewed from apple juice and mild panic. Baby Marie Curie complimented the centerpiece, a stuffed duck wearing a crown. Baby Newton chewed quietly on a coaster. Baby Ada Lovelace programmed a nap schedule using string and a bell. Albert pulled Future Einstein aside. "Now," he whispered, "how do we reverse this?" Future Einstein floated to the time machine, opened a panel, and revealed a compartment filled with odd buttons. "These are the backup stabilizers," he said, each one tied to a core principle of time: curiosity, chaos, creativity. He frowned. "We're missing one." Albert looked confused. "What?" "Cleansing," Future Einstein said. Albert groaned. "You're saying we need another bath?" Future Einstein nodded. "One final bath. But not just any bath. A universal reset bath." Albert turned to Reginald. "How much bathwater did you spill?" Reginald looked ashamed. "All of it." Albert exhaled, then ran to the sink. He filled a bucket with warm water. He added the lavender soap. He placed the bucket beneath the time machine and whispered, "For the sake of all genius babies, please work." The machine blinked, then burped. Then something new. A bubble. But not any bubble. A reality bubble. It shimmered in the air, swirling with every color of thought. Albert reached for it, but Future Einstein stopped him. "If you touch it," he warned, "you go back." Albert paused. "Back where?" "Back to bath time." Albert hesitated, then nodded. He dipped a finger into the bubble. The room flashed. The babies giggled. And one by one, they vanished. Tesla with a spark, Curie with a shimmer, Da Vinci with a swirl, and Reginald with a bow, until only Albert remained. And then, Even future Einstein faded. "See you in algebra," he whispered, and then silence. Albert stood alone. In his nursery. No flying babies. No time rips. No pudding-powered gadgets. Just the faint scent of lavender. And a full bath waiting. His mother's voice called down the hall. "Albert, it's 6:45. Albert looked around. He walked to the mirror. Stared at himself. Messy, genius, brave. He smiled. And for the first time in recorded toddler history, he walked toward the bath. Not to run, not to time jump, but to finally take control. The timeline had been repaired, kind of, after a catastrophic spill of bathwater into the peanut butter-powered time core. Einstein's nursery was flooded with baby versions of history's greatest geniuses, floating, glowing, inventing, and refusing naps. With the help of tea parties, crayon equations, and sheer toddler willpower, Einstein managed to send them all back. Almost all. Because one stayed. He didn't float out. He didn't shimmer. He didn't even burp dramatically like baby Schrödinger. Instead, he hid behind the bookshelf, inside a cardboard box labeled "Important Socks." And when the smoke cleared and reality folded neatly back into shape like a well-behaved blanket, baby Nikola Tesla peeked out, holding a fork in one hand and a potato in the other. "Your timeline has decent snacks," he whispered. "I'm staying." Albert Einstein, age 3, was no stranger to chaos. He had survived bath monsters, temporal clones, and holograms with hygiene obsessions. But even he wasn't ready for what baby Tesla was about to do. It started as most disasters do, with a hum. Not a cute toddler hum. A deep electrical buzz that made the juice boxes vibrate on the shelf. Albert looked up from his recovery nap and saw Tesla standing in the middle of the nursery, barefoot, eyes wide, hair already defying gravity, jamming the fork into the potato with the intensity of someone conducting an orchestra made entirely of lightning. Albert sat up slowly. Whatcha doing?" Tesla didn't blink, harnessing raw potential from the starch gods. Albert blinked back. "The what?" Tesla raised the potato. "Do you understand what this is?" "A snack." "No," Tesla whispered. "It's power. Compressed. Delicious. Shaped like destiny." Albert tilted his head. "You're gonna electrocute yourself." Tesla grinned. "I've done it before. Great fun." Before Albert could stop him, Tesla waddled into the kitchen, dragging his potato like a prized trophy, and shoved the fork tuber into the side of the microwave. The microwave, already unstable thanks to its recent career as a backup launch portal, buzzed, blinked, and then purred. Albert's mom was in the living room reading a book titled "How to Negotiate with Toddlers Without Crying." She didn't even notice. And then it happened. The microwave turned on. With no button pressed. Tesla screamed with delight. "I have made sparks from starch." Albert screamed too, mostly because the microwave light was now flashing Morse code in Latin. Tesla turned toward Albert. "Do you see? The future needs me. Not clean baths. Not loofahs. Not bedtime. Me." Albert covered his face. "You're gonna turn the dishwasher into a rocket, aren't you?" Tesla's eyes sparkled. "Not if the fridge gets there first." Albert dragged him back into the nursery. "Look," he said, hands on hips. "You can't stay here. You're from a different timeline. You're technically due for a top hat and a very disappointing pigeon obsession." Tesla nodded solemnly. "Pigeons are magnificent." Albert groaned. "The thing is, we fixed the timeline. You staying here messes it up." Tesla held up a drawing. It was a crayon blueprint of the house. Each room had been labeled with diagrams, energy flows, and potential inventions. In the bathroom, a note, "Convert tub into anti-bath vaporizer." "You want to destroy the bath?" Albert asked. Tesla nodded. "Because you hate it too?" Tesla's face grew serious. "I have never known greater betrayal than the moment a rubber duck was used to scrub my armpit." Albert felt his soul stir. Same. They stared at each other. A long, shared silence of soaked memories and soapy trauma. Then Albert reached under the rug, pulled out a scroll of hidden blueprints, and unrolled it. It was titled, Operation Beach. Babies against tub horrors. Tesla's mouth dropped open. You've been building resistance already? Albert pointed to the subprojects. Duck deprogram is shampoo neural blocker. Toilet portal, tested on carrots only. Tesla wept softly. You are my people. They sat down and worked for hours. Tesla powered the mini whiteboard with lemon batteries made from stolen snacks. Albert calibrated the duck sensor array with a spoon and a juice straw. Together, they created the ultimate invention, the bath time disruption beacon. It looked like a hairdryer made from macaroni and dreams. When activated, it would send out a pulse that would confuse any adult within 20 feet, redirecting their bath attempts toward vague household tasks or philosophical debate about missing socks. Albert wasn't just avoiding bath time now. He was building a resistance. Tesla recruited. He found Clean Albert's backup code and reprogrammed him into slightly dusty Albert, who now wore mismatched socks and considered sneezing a form of protest. They built duck decoys with lasers. They installed a slippery tile defense grid in front of the bathroom door. They wrote an anthem, a stirring march with lyrics like, "We may be young, we may be small / but soap will never win it all." It was beautiful. It got out of hand. Albert started noticing things. The fridge light blinked twice when he opened it. The night light buzzed like a walkie-talkie. Tesla began wearing a cape. And one day, Albert walked into the playroom and found 6 other babies, from other timelines, sitting in a circle, nodding solemnly. A sign above them read, "The League of Dry Toddlers." Einstein's house was no longer just a home. It was now headquarters. Tesla stood on a laundry basket giving a speech. "No more towels," he shouted. "No more rubber ducks. No more bubble beards that drip into your ears." The babies roared. Albert froze. This wasn't a club. It was a movement, and he had started it. Tesla turned. "Albert, you've returned. We're drafting legislation to outlaw lavender." Albert raised a hand. "I like lavender." Guess. Tesla narrowed his eyes. "Compromise leads to soap, friend." Albert walked forward, past the charts, past the towel-burning effigy made from string cheese and broken crayons, past slightly dusty Albert giving out stickers that said, "I stayed dry today." He stepped up on the basket. "Everyone," he said, "I started this because I didn't want to be forced into something." Nods. "I started this because bath time felt unfair. What? Cold? Unrequested." Cheers. "But now, we're becoming the thing we feared." Confused silence. "We're forcing each other to fear soap. We're acting like duck loofahs are our enemies instead of bath time delivery devices with questionable eyes." The pause. "And worst of all, we're starting to like the smell of dirt." Guess. Albert pointed at Tesla. "You plugged a potato into a microwave." Tesla held it up like a trophy. "It worked." Albert smiled. "I know. It was brilliant." Then he held up something else. His favorite bath toy. A small blue whale. "Quiet. Sometimes," Albert said, "I miss him." The babies looked at each other. Reginald stepped forward, holding a lace bib. He was quite good at floating. Albert looked at Tesla. "You're welcome to stay," he said. "But we can't be afraid forever. Eventually, we must bathe." Tesla stared. And then, "Can we install lasers in the tub?" Albert grinned. "Yes." Tesla nodded. "Then I accept the compromise." The babies clapped. The anthem was rewritten. Albert hung a sign over the doorway. "Bath time resistance, now accepting bubbles, under supervision." And the bath that night? Still splashy, still soapy, still a little traumatic, but with duck decoys, laser sounds, and a blue whale named Destiny. It was a victory. There are moments in a child's life that define who they become. For most toddlers, it's something simple, a favorite toy, a first word, a forbidden cookie snatched in defiance. But for Albert Einstein, age 3, the moment of transformation came on a Saturday. It smelled like lavender. It sounded like bubbles fizzing. And it began with 4 tiny geniuses standing on the edge of a bathtub, staring into a future soaked in doom. It was the final straw. The day the soap pushed too far. the day the babies declared war. It all started when Einstein's mother tried to compromise. After weeks of chaos, interdimensional duck sightings, and multiple timelines collapsing from bath-related stress, she had finally had enough. She walked into the kitchen, slammed her mug down, and announced to no one in particular, "Today, the babies get clean." And she meant it. She set up 4 baths. Not one, but side by side in the hallway like a row of glistening, bubbly traps. Warm towels folded like smug pillows. Rubber ducks lined up in ranks. Shampoo bottles armed with pump tops. She was ready. Unfortunately, so were they. Albert had been preparing for this. So had baby Tesla, still clutching his potato like a power source. Baby Newton, quietly sketching gravity-based duck artillery. And baby Marie Curie, who had started storing bubble solution in labeled test tubes and muttering, "This isn't cleaning, it's containment." The 4 babies sat in the nursery with juice boxes and blueprints. Albert pointed at a diagram. "This is Operation Rubber Rebellion." Tesla nodded. "We use decoy ducks." Curie frowned. "We launch soap-neutralizing foam." Newton sneezed into a tissue. "And I drop an apple on the shampoo bottle." Albert raised his hand. "We begin at towel deployment." And so, the battle began. Einstein's mom walked into the nursery, towel in one hand, loofah in the other. She smiled. "All right, who's first?" The 4 babies stood. Tesla raised his potato. "Not today." Curie clicked her test tubes together. "This lab is closed for scrubbing." Newton pointed dramatically at the bathtub. "I reject your gravitational pull." Albert stepped forward. "You leave us no choice, Mother. We bathe on our terms." She blinked. "Oh no." Then Tesla launched a decoy duck. It flew, squeaked, exploded in a puff of glitter. The hallway lights flickered. Curie tossed her test tubes. Foam hissed, bubbling over the bathtub's edge, neutralizing the bubble bath with harmless lemon extract and the faint scent of defiance. Newton rolled an apple down a makeshift ramp. It collided with the shampoo bottle, knocking it over like a bowling pin of tyranny. Einstein pressed a button on his juicebox-powered remote. Every rubber duck in the hallway woke up. Not literally. They didn't gain consciousness. But they did light up. They chirped. And they waddled, badly, but menacingly. The army of ducks swarmed the hallway. Tesla screamed, "For freedom!" Curie threw foam. Newton launched loofah nets from a slingshot. Albert dove for the bathtub, unrolling a tarp that turned into a mini trampoline. It was genius. It was chaos. It was war. And then the hallway filled with fog, steamy, lavender-scented fog that choked the senses and coated the floors in suspicious relaxation. Albert stumbled. Tesla's hair stood up. Curie tripped over a duck carrying a note that read, "Quack you." And then she arrived, Einstein's mom, standing in the fog like a final boss. One hand held a towel folded with tactical precision. The other? A loofah. A massive, duck-shaped loofah that squeaked once and sent chills down every diapered spine in the room. "Enough," she said. The duck army paused. Tesla dropped his potato. Curie gulped. Even Newton's apple slowed. Albert faced her. "We had to fight. You gave us no choice." She stepped forward. "I asked for 5 minutes of cooperation." Albert shouted, "You asked for submission. Clean submission." Tesla yelled. Curie nodded. "You weaponized soap." His mom looked at the foam, the duck drones, the smashed shampoo. And then she sighed. Not a loud sigh. A long sigh. The kind that carries generations of toddler negotiations in its breath. She crouched. "I get it," she said. "You want control. You want to say when and how you bathe." The babies looked at each other. "Yes," Albert said quietly. She smiled. "Then let's make a deal." The room fell still. "I'll let you choose your soap," she said. "You can veto one rubber duck. And there will be no singing unless you sing it." The babies whispered. Tesla asked, "And the water temperature?" "You test it first." Newton asked, "Loofah pressure?" "Moderate." Curie asked, "Scented shampoo?" "Optional." They stared. Albert stepped forward. "One condition," he said. "We bathe as equals." She smiled. "You drive the boat." He nodded. And so the war ended. Not with a sponge, not with surrender, but with negotiation. Einstein climbed into the tub, duck helmet on, goggles ready. Tesla wired the faucet to light up. Curie added glow-in-the-dark bubble stars. Newton dropped an apple in for science. And together, they bathed. On their own terms. The resistance didn't die that day. It evolved. It became something better, stronger, cleaner. The bath time accord was signed in crayon, a treaty of respect and optional conditioner. And in that moment, as the duck floated by and the bath hummed with the sound of peace, Albert Einstein whispered, "This is how you win a war. Not with foam, but with fairness." Albert Einstein was 3 years old, and already serving a multi-temporal sentence. He'd been grounded before, sure. He'd had toys taken away, story time delayed, cookies denied. But this was different. This was time jail. And not just any time jail. It was a punishment so epic, so complex, it required 3 calendars, a note from the universe, and a warning issued by a singing rubber duck wearing a monocle. The verdict had been delivered by the highest authority in the land. Not the president, not the time police, not even grandma. It was his mother, Einstein's mother, whose patience had survived physics experiments in the blender, sock-based wormholes, and a duck uprising in the hallway, finally snapped. And when she did, she didn't just ground her 3-year-old son. She grounded every version of him, across time. It started simply enough. Albert had once again attempted to install a snack-based propulsion unit in the laundry chute. Just a light prototype. The potato launcher, powered by juice boxes and an ambitious banana. But the banana misfired. And so did the cat. The incident became known in the household as the Meowful miscalculation, and it ended with laundry in the attic, juice in the fridge motor, and the family cat refusing to acknowledge any form of gravity ever again. His mom walked in, holding her mop like a sword, looked at Albert, who had a sock over one eye and was holding a remote made from toothpaste caps, and she simply said, "That's it. You're grounded." Albert blinked. Grounded where? She folded her arms. All timelines. He frowned. That's not logistically enforceable. She narrowed her eyes. Try me. And somehow she did it. All at once, across every timeline and dimension, every version of Baby Einstein heard the same word from their respective moms. Bath. Now. And that's how it began. The timeline cracked like an egg in a microwave. Albert found himself pulled not forward, not backward, but sideways. He was suddenly in the bubble dimension, floating beside other versions of himself. All 3 years old. All with the same hairstyle. All wearing defiant expressions and waterproof goggles. One had a pirate accent. One wore a cape made of spaghetti noodles. One kept muttering, "Soap is surveillance." They were the alternate Einsteins. From Timeline X4b, where Einstein rode dinosaurs instead of tricycles. Timeline QP3, where Einstein had 4 arms and used 3 of them to dodge shampoo. Timeline Pancake, don't ask. And they were all in bathtubs. Every single version of Einstein, from every alternate reality, was now stuck inside a cosmic bathroom loop, the most powerful punishment in toddler history. It wasn't just water. It was psychological. The tubs never got cold, but never quite warm enough. The ducks blinked too much. The bubbles whispered math equations. And the soap? The soap came with reflections, literal memories of past bath time betrayals. Albert stared into a bar of lavender and saw the moment his baby hair was styled into fluffy volcano mode and posted online. Time slowed. The rubber duck bobbed solemnly. This was time jail. And there was no escape. Albert turned to Einstein 4 arms. "We need to hack obedience." Spaghetti Cape nodded. "Temporal compliance is programmable." Pirate Einstein raised his duck and yelled, "Ari, the soap won't win this voyage." Albert rubbed his chin, leaving a bubble beard by accident. Then he remembered. Relative obedience. A theory he had abandoned months ago. Too unstable, too dangerous, 2. The obedient. It was a theory based on the idea that rules were bendable if seen from the right perspective. If time bent, so could consequences. He just needed one thing: bathtub energy, which, as it turned out, was incredibly powerful. All across the timelines, bathtubs were full. Soap was being lathered. Towels were flying. Shampoo was poured like rainwater during a thunderstorm of justice. Einstein built a capacitor from bubbles. He shaped a dome of foam, added a spark from the shampoo static, and attached a crayon with the word "No" written in 12 languages. Then he connected it to a duck with 2 batteries taped to its feet. The duck vibrated, glowed, and whispered, "Obey this." And just like that, the relative obedience bottle was born. It looked like a baby bottle. It smelled like citrus revolution. It shimmered with every color of rebellion. He held it high. The other Einstein stared. Spaghetti Kate cried, "It's beautiful." 4 arms Einstein clapped with all his hands. Pirate Einstein saluted with his duck. And they drank. 1 sip. And suddenly, they weren't disobedient. They were selectively obedient. Einstein's mind cleared. He could now hear every mother's command in slow motion, like it was traveling through jelly. The words, "Wash behind your ears," now arrived 3 seconds late, just enough time to duck. The phrase, "No more juice until you rinse," translated as juice after a brief misunderstanding. It was genius. Albert reached out and twisted the timeline. 1 full spin. The bathtubs trembled, and reality bent around the bubble dome. He snapped, and every Einstein stepped out of their tubs at once. Still wet, still smelling faintly of justice, but free. Free from the grip of time jail. Free from endless baths. Free from lavender tyranny. They looked at each other and knew what had to be done. The bathtubs vanished into portal bubbles. The loofahs were folded respectfully and launched into space as tribute. And the soap? It was kept, because even the fiercest rebellion sometimes smells better with lemon zest. Albert returned to his nursery. Alone. Powerful. He placed the relative obedience bottle on a shelf. He labeled it, "Use only during major toddler revolutions." And just as he was about to nap, his mom peeked in. She didn't yell, didn't hold a loofah, didn't even mention the cat. She just looked around, raised an eyebrow, and smiled. "You smell clean," she said. Albert smiled back. "Relatively." She nodded, suspicious but proud. He lay back, duck under arm, goggles slightly fogged, and whispered, "Time jail can't hold me unless I choose to be caught." It was nap time. The nursery was quiet. A rare peace had fallen over the toys. The juice boxes weren't leaking. The duck army was asleep. Even the time machine, now disguised as a laundry basket, hummed gently in standby. Albert Einstein, age 3, lay in his crib, plotting. Not in a dangerous way. In a thoughtful, slightly sticky way. 1 sock was missing. His hair had begun forming constellations of static, and his latest crayon theory, how to fake snoring in 4 dimensions, was almost complete. But something was off. It began with a low rumble. Not from the microwave. Not from Tesla's potato reactor. This was deeper, like the universe trying to clear its throat. Then the air bent, wobbled, and from the diaper-changing station emerged a man. Not a tall man, not a grown man, a bigger toddler, wearing a lab coat made from blanket scraps, eyebrows wild, socks unmatched, and a faint halo of dandruff. Albert sat up. Stranger danger? The figure adjusted his baby glasses. "I'm not a stranger. I'm cute." Albert's pacifier dropped. "You're me." The visitor nodded. "From the future." Albert squinted. "How far?" 6 years. Albert's eyes widened. "So you're 9? Technically 8 3/4. But that's not the point." Albert sniffed. "You didn't bathe either." Future Albert blinked. "Excuse me? You smell like fear and cheese crackers." Future Albert blushed. "I've been busy saving the universe." Albert tilted his head. "Without soap." Future Albert took a deep breath. "I've come with a warning. If you don't take a bath, the world ends in dandruff. A long silence. Then Albert leaned back. Define world. Everything, future Albert said. The planets, the timelines, the ability to wear black shirts without white shoulder flakes. Albert crossed his arms. Dramatic. Future Albert pulled out a scroll. It unraveled across the room, knocking over a juice tower. Behold, he said, the Great Flake Crisis of 2041. The scroll showed terrifying sketches, snowstorms made of scalp particles, shampoo rationing, society ruled by conditioners. Albert blinked. That's disturbing. Future Albert nodded. And it all starts with you. But I bathed yesterday. Albert cried. No, future Albert said, pointing to a bubble in the timeline. That was a simulation. Remember? The hologram. Clean Albert 2.0. He showered. You didn't. Albert sighed. I was proud of that one. I know, future Albert whispered. He tried to run for mayor of the bathtub. Albert bit his lip. So, why now? Future Albert paced the room. Because you're reaching the point of no return. If you skip today's bath, your DNA will imprint anti-wash protocol across all timelines. Albert gasped. Is that real? No, future Albert admitted. But it sounded impressive. Albert smirked. You haven't changed a bit. Future Albert crouched. Look, I get it. Baths are slippery negotiations wrapped in bubbles and betrayal. But they're necessary. Albert raised a brow. Says the guy with peanut butter in his hair. That's gel, future Albert mumbled. Albert stood, pulling his blanket around him like a cape. Tell me something only I would know. Future Albert nodded. When we were 1.5, we hid a peanut under the carpet because it looked lonely. Albert's jaw dropped. Peanut Paul. Told you. Albert circled him. So how do I know you're not just here to trick me into soap? Because, future Albert said, I brought a gift. He pulled out a box. Glowing. Humming. Smelling faintly of mystery. Albert opened it. Inside was a bar of soap. But not just any soap. It was quantum soap. Color changing. Scent shifting. Mood sensitive. And, most importantly, it told jokes. Albert picked it up. It's warm. The soap blinked. Why did the shampoo go to school? Albert stared. Because it wanted to be head of the class. Albert giggled. That's horrible. Future Albert smiled. But you laughed. Albert turned it over. Can I name it? Already done, future Albert said. Its name is Latherton. The soap winked. I also sing sea shanties. Albert whispered, I'm scared, but also intrigued. Future Albert sat beside him. You don't have to love bats, but you do have to survive them. One day, you'll be on the front lines of physics. You'll face black holes, bureaucracies, and strange adults who ask what your career goals are. Albert shivered. Terrifying. Exactly, future Albert said. But a clean genius is a respected genius. And no one listens to the kid with cereal in his armpit. Albert sniffed his armpit. That's not cereal. It's crunchy curiosity. They sat in silence. Then Latherton burped bubbles and sang, Scrub your fate upon the sea/lather up and you'll be free. Albert sighed. Fine. He stood, marched to the bathroom, turned on the tap. Future Albert followed. Together, they prepared the bath. Duck lineup, approved. Water temperature, toddler Goldilocks. Towel, pre-fluffed. And then Albert stepped in. He held up Latherton. This better not tickle. It exfoliates destiny, the soap said. The bubbles rose. The time loop shimmered. Across every timeline, Baby Einstein's paused. A ripple of cleanliness surged through existence. A sneeze was stopped. A rash never formed. A teddy bear, once sticky, now hugged freely. Albert scrubbed. Twice. Even behind the ears. And when he stepped out, wrapped in a towel, future Albert saluted. You've saved the timelines. Albert grinned. Do I get a parade? Better, future Albert said. You get respectable scalp hygiene. Albert walked back into the nursery, fresh, warm, and slightly confused. "Will I remember this?" he asked. Future Albert shook his head. "Only in your dreams, and possibly your next science project." Albert looked out the window. "Will I become you?" "Parts of me," Future Albert said. "The rest? You'll invent yourself." And then he vanished. A soft poof, a faint smell of shampoo, a ripple in the duck bath. Albert stood alone. Smiling, he turned to the time machine and whispered, "Next time, I visit me." And the duck squeaked softly. Some say he was trying to make bath time more fun. Some say it was an experiment in aerodynamic hygiene. Albert Einstein, age 3, says, "I wanted bubbles, but better." It began with a simple observation: soap bubbles float. Helium balloons float higher. So what happens, he asked himself, if you combine them? No one had the courage to ask that question before, or the reckless access to both a bubble bath kit and 6 leftover birthday balloons. Einstein had both. It started with a trip to the garage, disguised as a quest for crayons. While his mother arranged the towels and queued up the infamous duck song playlist, Albert was in the corner, unscrewing the helium tank valve and whispering, "Let's see who's boss now, gravity." He filled his special bubble amplification flask, a juice cup with 3 stickers and a straw that he claimed was quantum certified, and injected the helium into the bubble soap. The result? The most cheerful, high-pitched bubble foam in human history. The bubbles didn't just pop. They giggled. Einstein poured the mixture into the tub. He called it Operation Liftoff. And liftoff it did. At first, everything looked normal. Warm water, a soft towel, lathered in the talking soap humming a sea shanty in the background. But then, the bubbles multiplied, and floated, and didn't stop floating. Einstein sat in the tub with a grin. Then the tub began to rise. Slowly, smoothly, like a polite elevator made of ceramic rebellion. Einstein blinked. "Ha!" He rose past the shampoo shelf, past the family photo on the hallway wall, past the second floor, narrowly avoiding Grandma, who was brushing her hair and yelling about biscuits. He was now above the ceiling fan. The tub bumped against the attic door, and it creaked open like a curtain lifting on a very unexpected stage play. That's when it got weird. The rubber duck squeaked twice and rotated its head. Einstein froze. The duck blinked. "Is that you, Commander Quack?" Einstein whispered. The duck raised one flipper and pointed forward. Einstein gasped. "You're steering?" The duck nodded. A small periscope emerged from the water. Einstein leaned closer. "We're airborne." Then thunder rumbled. He was in the clouds now, above the trees, above the house, above bath time jurisdiction. The sky turned dark and electric. The tub wobbled. The duck adjusted course. Einstein grabbed the side of the tub. "Wait, where are we going?" The duck didn't answer. Lightning flashed. Einstein ducked, no pun intended, as a cloud burst beside them, spraying ice-cold mist into the tub. The water sloshed. The bubbles expanded. And then, horror of horrors, his towel slipped overboard. "No!" he screamed. That was double fluffed. The duck turned, stone-faced. Einstein narrowed his eyes. "You planned this, didn't you?" The duck turned back around. The tub tilted left. Einstein grabbed the shampoo bottle and tried to radio home through the foamy walkie-talkie he'd built from bath toys and a harmonica. "Base? Base, this is Bubble One. We have breached naptime airspace. Altitude unknown. Rubber duck hostile. Repeat, rubber duck hostile." Nothing. Only static. And one faint sound of Grandma yelling something about porridge. Einstein checked the supplies. One loofah, semi-damp. One talking soap, currently narrating its own autobiography. One duck with steering delusions. No snacks. And then he noticed something far worse than being hungry. The tub was rising faster. He peeked over the edge. They were above the thunderclouds now. The stars were starting to twinkle. And the oxygen? Thinner than a toddler's attention span during library story time. Einstein's hair stood completely up. The duck squeaked once, then twice, then flapped its stubby wings. It was steering with intention now. Einstein said, If you fly us into orbit, I swear on Newton's pacifier I will uninstall your squeaker. But the duck didn't care. It had the power. And the view? Unbelievable. From the stratosphere, Einstein could see the world curve, playgrounds like dots, houses like cookie crumbs, the backyard sandbox like a faded map of Mars. It was beautiful, until the bubbles began to pop. One by one. Puff, puff, puff. Einstein gasped. No, no, no. We're losing lift. The duck chirped and tried to patch with foam, but it was too late. Gravity woke up and remembered it had one job. Einstein screamed. The tub dropped. Spinning. The duck flailed. Einstein grabbed the soap. Latin. Sing. Now. Latherton belted a bubble opera that somehow slowed their descent to a less panicked velocity. Still falling, but musically. Einstein reached into the foam and pulled out his emergency backup parachute, a shower curtain tied with rubber bands and a string of floss. He leapt to the side, wrapped the curtain around the duck, and together they parachuted into a soft bush behind the garage. Philip landed upside down in the recycling bin. The duck squeaked weakly, its eyes slightly tilted, its courage undiminished. Einstein rolled over, soaked, shivering but alive. The door to the house opened. His mother stood there, holding a towel. Albert. He looked up. Hi, Mom. She stared at the wet bush, the floating bubbles, the scorched duck. Then she said something no one expected. Are you clean? Einstein blinked, then looked at his arms, his legs, his perfectly bubble-bathed torso. He smiled. Yes. She nodded. Well done. He stood, soaked in glory. He turned to the duck. Next time, we build a seatbelt. The duck saluted. Einstein marched back inside, towel over shoulders, hair defying science, heart filled with adventure. And as he climbed into bed, Latherton whispered from the soap dish, Mission complete, Captain. Bubbles achieved. Einstein nodded. Tomorrow, he mumbled, we bubble sideways. The house was quiet, suspiciously quiet. Albert Einstein, age 3, tiptoed through the hallway wearing his sock shoes, 2 mismatched socks stuffed with cereal flakes for noise cancellation. Operation Soap Avoidance. Phase 9. But something had changed. Mom was humming. And not her usual, you better take your bath. This was different. Calculated. Like she knew something. Albert peeked around the corner. She stood in the kitchen, stirring tea, with a glint in her eye that suggested either supreme calm or total dimensional awareness. Her glasses were fogged. Her slippers looked upgraded. The kettle whistled, but in Morse code. Albert squinted. Morse code again? I thought we agreed on semaphore. The kettle chirped once. Mom didn't turn around. Hi, sweetheart, she said. Albert froze. You saw me? I always do, she said. You were born under a microscope. Albert slowly stepped into the kitchen. I need to ask you something. Mom sipped her tea. Before or after I reveal I'm also a time traveler? Albert's mouth fell open. His pacifier fell out. He paused. Then Albert blinked. Wait, you're what now? Mom smiled. You didn't think you invented all this alone, did you? Who do you think gave you the old alarm clock to take apart? I assumed fate. It was me. You let me dismantle your phone and flush it into the past. It wasn't a phone. It was a temporal decoy. You flushed it perfectly. Albert sat down. My whole brain is itchy. She slid a folder across the table, labeled Subject A, Bath Time Rebellion / Thesis Draft, Volume 7. Albert opened it. Drawings, charts, observations, stickers, bubble trajectories, soap resistance levels, emotional graphs labeled grump to giggle ratios. You've been studying me? Not just studying, she said. You're the subject of my PhD thesis. I'm publishing on temporal curiosity in infant geniuses. Albert held up a diagram of himself trying to bribe the duck with raisins. This is shockingly accurate. She nodded. That duck is also on scholarship now. Albert rubbed his temples. So you knew about the bathtub launch? Built the helium valve myself. That duck doesn't steer, I do. Albert gasped. Traitor! The duck waddled into the room, shrugged, and squeaked apologetically. Albert pointed. So all this time, while I thought I was escaping your bath traps, you were part of a grander lesson, she said. One I've been teaching across many versions of you. Albert's head thudded onto the table. So I'm not a time pioneer? Oh no, she said kindly. You're brilliant, but I've been nudging the timeline for a while. He groaned. So that wormhole under the laundry basket? Mine. The quantum cookie jar? Calibrated by me. The sudden appearance of Sir Reginald, the powdered wig baby duke from 1895? She hesitated. That one was a Ms. Click. Albert stared. You're the bath boss. She leaned down and smiled warmly. I'm the mom boss. Albert looked at the tea kettle. It blinked. He narrowed his eyes. So what happens if I still refuse bath time today? She took a deep breath. Then you become him. She turned the TV screen on. Static flickered. Then an image. A towering figure, cloaked in oily shadows. Hair plastered with 3 decades of conditioner fear. Skin shimmering with anti-soap deflection. He raised his fist. I am Drazer, Lord of Greece. Albert blinked. Whoa. Mom nodded. That's you. In 2042, you rule the world. You outlaw all water above the ankles. Albert covered his mouth. No. You build a device that turns raindrops into spaghetti. No. You erase all bubble wands from history. Albert burst into tears. That's evil. She hugged him. It starts with one skip bath. Today, that's the tipping point. Albert sniffed. But I don't like the itchy towel. I replaced it with a fluff enchanted one, she said. It has nanofleece. It sings lullabies. I don't like water in my ears. Ducky has ear shields now. Albert paused. He looked at the folder again, then back at her. You tricked me. I raised you, she corrected, in every timeline. Albert's lip trembled. So, I never stood a chance. Mom smiled and kissed his forehead. You always had a chance. I just made sure you didn't fall into an evil, greasy doom spiral. Albert stood. So what now? What do I do? You choose, she said. That's the real experiment. Free will in the face of destiny. Albert walked to the sink, splashed some water, tasted it. Filtered, he whispered, with a hint of raspberry. Timeline hydration science, she said proudly. He walked to the hallway, stared at the tub, steam gently curling. Latherton the soap waiting, now wearing a monocle and tiny cape. The duck saluted, and Albert turned back. One last question. Were you ever me in another timeline? She laughed. No, Albert, but I was the girl who kicked Newton in the shin with a roller skate when he questioned bath physics. Albert nodded slowly. Respect. And with that, he stepped into the tub. The water welcomed him like destiny itself. And somewhere, in the future, Drazer's greasy form dissolved into nothing. The timeline rethreaded itself. Bubble wands returned to store shelves. Spaghetti stopped falling from clouds. Einstein leaned back. The duck squeaked twice. Next time, Albert muttered, we visit her past. The soap giggled. You're not ready. Albert grinned. But I will be. It started as all legendary tales do, with a ripple in the tub. Albert Einstein, freshly scrubbed, leaned back against the warm ceramic wall, sighing like a philosopher who just discovered that bubbles could in fact be a form of enlightenment. The duck floated nearby. Loyal, silent, suspiciously quiet. Albert opened one eye. You've been too quiet, Commander Quack. The duck tilted its head. Then it happened. A jolt in the water. A vibration not from this timeline. The water shimmered. The bubbles turned blue. The duck glowed. Einstein blinked. Did you just hum? The duck rose into the air, levitated 6 inches above the tub, surrounded by a corona of soapy steam and quantum feathers. Then it spoke. Not in quacks, not in squeaks, but in fluent, echoing English. Albert Einstein, Time has chosen us both. Albert screamed. Ducks can talk. The duck nodded solemnly. Only when the multibath is at stake. The what now? The multibath. The tangled nexus of all timelines tied to personal hygiene. You think soap is just soap? You sweet, brilliant fool. The duck spun midair and flared its tiny wings. A holographic projection appeared. It showed multiple versions of bathtubs, ancient, futuristic, floating, underwater, steampunk, upside down, all connected by a glowing loofah-shaped galaxy. Einstein reached out. That's beautiful. It was, the duck whispered, until the Grease King rose. Albert's mouth fell open. You mean the version of me from the bad future? The duck nodded. Drazer, the one who outlawed all cleansing. He's spreading, one skipped bath at a time. We tried to stop him, but our finest warriors were lost in the great conditioner collapse of 37. Why didn't you tell me sooner? You weren't ready, the duck said. Also, I didn't have thumbs. Very hard to open files. Albert stood in the tub. So what now? The duck's eyes glowed gold. We unite. Time duck and time child. Albert placed his hand over his heart. You had me at multi-bath. Suddenly, the bathroom mirror shimmered. A dark figure appeared, greased back hair, sunglasses made of dishwater, cloak dripping with rejected shampoo. Drazer, you should have stayed smelly, he snarled. Now you'll feel the wrath of stink. Einstein gasped. It's me. From the future, but with way worse skincare. Drazer pointed a greasy finger. You allied with the duck? The very being who soaped my destiny. The duck flapped forward. I lathered you once. I'll lather you again. A rubber duck lightsaber appeared in midair. Drazer summoned a bubble of black oil. Einstein whispered, Are we in a bath time boss battle? Drazer hurled the oil. The duck blocked with a bar of weaponized soap. Einstein ducked behind the sink, pulling out his trusty bubble gun, converted from a toothpaste dispenser and a spoon. The room filled with steam and rubbery destiny. Drazer leapt into the air, landing on the towel rack. You can't stop entropy, child. The world prefers laziness. The duck charged. Then let's clean this mess. Einstein pressed the button on his gun. The room froze. A burst of blue foam spiraled through space. Time warped. Suddenly, they weren't in the bathroom anymore. They were inside the time tub, the sacred interdimensional bathtub that connects all cleanliness timelines. Einstein stood beside the duck on a soap bar bridge. Drazer hovered above on a platform made of used floss. Drazer's voice echoed. This is where it all began. This tub chose me. Einstein shouted, It chose me. I'm the bath prodigy. You're the pawn. Drazer screamed. Your mom played us both. Einstein paused, honestly not denying that. The duck said, Enough. It ends here. And with that, the final battle began. Soap versus oil. Bubble versus sludge. Foam grenades flew. Einstein and the duck fought back to back. How are you so agile? I trained in the whirlpool temple of Duckerai. Amazing! Drazer summoned a grease wave. You'll never bathe again. The duck launched forward, spinning like a torpedo, slamming into Drazer's chest with a squeak heard across timelines. Drazer faltered. Einstein pulled out his final invention, the quantum showerhead. This one's for all the rubber ducks I threw out too soon. He unleashed it. Pure, warm, mint-scented clarity. It washed over Drazer like destiny. His armor cracked. His grease melted. And then he was just Albert. Future Albert. Tired. And very, very clean. He opened his eyes. I forgot what lavender smelled like. Einstein stepped forward. That's your reset. Future Albert nodded. Thank you, little me. The duck patted his head. Now go take a nap. And exfoliate. The time tub pulsed. The timeline corrected itself. Einstein, the duck, and former Drazer floated down, safely landing in the original bathroom. Tub, towel, and all. Einstein looked at the duck. You're not just a bath toy. The duck smirked. Never was. Will you stay? until the final bath is drawn. Einstein smiled. Then let's dry off. Together. The ducks squeaked in agreement. The mirror no longer shimmered. The grease was gone. The bathroom was at peace. For now. But somewhere in the distance, a shampoo bottle trembled. Because the next ripple was just beginning. Albert Einstein, age 3, stood on the edge of destiny in his pajamas. The bathroom was no longer just a bathroom. It was a swirling vortex of space-time, peanut butter fumes, bubble-shaped wormholes, and the smell of victory. Or maybe lavender soap. It was hard to tell anymore. Behind him, the time duck flapped with silent purpose, scanning readings on a floating loofah-shaped dashboard. In front of him, the bathtub glowed, not with ordinary bathwater shimmer, but with multiversal resonance. The ripples in it showed reflections of other worlds, baby Napoleons splashing, future Einsteins running away from shampoo, alternate universes where bath bubbles wore monocles and gave lectures on physics. But now it was time to fix it all. The chaos, the duck wars, the greasy future where shampoo was illegal and Einstein became a villain known as Drazer. All of it had led to this one final moment. And there was only one way to save the timeline. The peanut butter engine. It sat humming in the corner, its Lego bricks twitching, its spoon-powered flux capacitor dripping with Jif extra chunky. The machine that had taken months or hours, depending on which dimension you counted, to build. Albert placed his small hand on it. "You've served me well, sticky boy." The engine pulsed softly, as if whispering goodbye. The duck looked up. Once you activate it, the loop ends. Everything resets. All timelines restabilize. Albert nodded. "Will I remember anything?" "Only what matters most." Albert turned toward the bathtub. "The bath monster. The quantum shampoo. My future evil self. I'll remember the duck, right?" The duck floated a little closer. "I'm a constant." Albert smiled. Then, solemnly, he stepped forward. His bare foot touched the cool tile. Time froze for a heartbeat. From the hallway, his mother called out, as if through layers of alternate pasts. "Albert, sweetie. Bath time." Albert took a breath. Time to splash for the last time. He lifted the peanut butter engine, held it high like a scientist offering a final experiment to the gods of cleanliness, and he dropped it into the bathtub. The result was immediate. A blast of golden foam. The walls glowed. Tiles rearranged. Rubber duckies spiraled like shooting stars. And from somewhere deep within the dimension of discarded bath toys, a chorus of tiny voices sang. "Rub, the world rewinds. Squeak the duck, unbind the binds." Einstein closed his eyes. He could feel everything shifting. The greasy timelines unraveling. Alternate versions of himself. Cowboy Albert, Pirate Albert, Invisible Albert, all folding gently back into the stream of one pure, duck-scented reality. The bathtub grew larger. Or maybe he grew smaller. Hard to say. The bubbles became constellations. His duck saluted him, then rocketed into a whirlpool with the dignity of a warrior returning to legend. And then, silence, stillness, and the faint pop of a soap bubble. Albert opened his eyes. He was sitting in a normal bathtub. The foam was perfectly calm. The rubber duck floated beside him, no longer glowing, no longer talking, just being a duck. The engine was gone. No peanut butter, no time warps, no screaming greasy future clones. Just the bathtub, and Albert, and peace. His mom peeked in. "How's my little scientist?" Albert blinked. He looked around. Everything was normal. Too normal. The duck squeaked softly. Albert whispered, "You remember too, don't you?" The duck said nothing, but Albert knew. His mom smiled. "I've never seen you so calm at bath time." Albert looked at his fingers. They were already getting wrinkly. He didn't scream, didn't protest, didn't even throw the sponge across the room like usual. He just sat, still, peaceful, dignified, like a tiny philosopher reflecting in a warm lake of destiny. His mom blinked. "Do you like baths now?" Albert turned slowly, thoughtfully. "Maybe," he said, and he meant it. But as she turned away to grab his towel, Albert leaned closer to the duck. "You heard her ask, right? The duck didn't respond. Albert smiled slyly. Let's keep her guessing. He splashed once, for fun, then leaned back into the tub, arms behind his head, as if floating through the cosmic remains of a bath time epic that no one would ever believe. Somewhere, far beyond the foam, a ripple of soap passed through the universe. Time bent slightly, and a rubber duck squeaked, not by accident, but with purpose, because the battle had ended. But the legend? That had just begun. Albert Einstein, freshly bathed, squeaky clean, and smelling faintly of watermelon shampoo, sat on the edge of his bed like a tiny emperor who had just conquered a kingdom of soap. The room was quiet, too quiet. His hair was fluffed, his fingernails trimmed, his face glistening like a polished apple at a science fair. The towel was neatly folded beside him. The duck lay next to his pillow, staring at the ceiling with that timeless, unreadable rubber expression. And Einstein? He smiled. It was a calm smile. The smile of a toddler who had fought the multiverse, stared down an army of shampoo ghosts, battled greasy versions of himself, and had finally taken a bath without screaming like a foghorn being chased by an octopus. His mom peeked in, eyes soft. Albert? Everything all right? Albert nodded. Never cleaner. She looked suspicious. You're not building something in your sock drawer again, are you? No, mother. She raised an eyebrow, narrowed her eyes like a detective with a badge made of cookie dough. Then she walked away. The moment the hallway light vanished, Albert's grin sharpened. He reached under his pillow. Not for a duck, not for a pacifier, but for plans. A roll of blueprints, still slightly damp from bathwater but perfectly legible, scribbled in crayon and pudding, smudged with imagination and mischief. On the top was a bold title, Operation Global Lather Reversal. Einstein whispered, clean on the outside, scheming on the inside. He unrolled the plans. It was brilliant, dastardly, deliciously diaper-level evil. His new invention would not merely avoid bath time. It would bend the very laws of hygiene. At the core of the blueprint was an engine, no longer peanut butter powered, but based on a far more powerful energy source, banana mush and static cling. Banatron 9000, he murmured. Fuel source, toddler rage and forbidden markers. He'd spent weeks, or maybe timelines, calculating the formula. If his math was correct, a precisely calibrated dish of spaghetti thrown at just the right angle could shatter the molecular bonds of all known soap particles within a 12-kilometer radius. No more bath. No more shampoo. No more being lured into the tub by promises of bubble beards and rubber fleets. Or the world would change. This time, he wouldn't time travel to avoid the bath. He'd change reality to make soap the villain. Phase 1, he muttered, tapping the plan. Release tiny scent particles into all major soap factories. Trigger mass allergic responses. Sneezes feigns adult fear. He pointed to the next step. Phase 2, rewrite the children's books. No more clean is good. Replace with dirt builds character. He laughed quietly. It wasn't evil. It was visionary. Suddenly, the duck squeaked beside him. Albert turned slowly. The duck tilted its head, judging. Albert raised an eyebrow. Don't look at me like that. You saw what they made me do. The scrubbing, the ear swabs. The duck said nothing. Albert leaned forward. Besides, I'm not removing baths forever. Just making them negotiable. The duck blinked. Albert blinked back. A slow standoff. Then, with the careful hand of a mastermind, Albert rolled up the blueprints, stuffed them gently into the secret pocket of his pajamas, the one sewn by Grandma for emergency crackers, and patted it twice. The plan was in motion, and no one suspected a thing. Outside his window, the stars twinkled with innocence. Inside, a diaper-sized rebellion was already underway. He laid down, blanket up to his chin, angelic smile on his face. The duck pulled in close. His mom returned a minute later, checked on him, kissed his forehead. You smell nice, she whispered. I do, he replied. Maybe you're finally growing up. Albert nodded slowly. Then, when she was gone, he turned to the duck and whispered, "Next time, I won't avoid the bath." He reached into his pocket, thumb resting on the first schematic. "I'll make the world allergic to soap." The duck squeaked. He winked. The stars blinked in rhythm with the universe. And deep, deep underground, in the toy chest beneath the laundry basket, something buzzed. A forgotten potato, wired to a fork. Tesla's backup, waiting. And if you listened closely enough, you could almost hear it. A rumble, a splash, and a giggle. Because this wasn't the end. Oh no, this was just the beginning. So, Einstein took a bath. But did the world get safer? Or did it just get slippery? If you laughed, gasped, or suddenly questioned the true power of a rubber duck, then you, my friend, belong here. Subscribe now for more wild, impossible, totally made-up tales of history's greatest minds doing absolutely ridiculous things. Because genius isn't just about equations. Sometimes, it's about turning bath time into a time loop crisis. Hit that subscribe button like it's a banana-powered flux capacitor. Ring the bell before Einstein rewrites your timeline. And remember, soap is temporary, but science fiction bath rebellions? That's forever.